Growing up with Asperger's syndrome made life a puzzle few could understand. I was a kid who saw the world in straight lines and exact details, while everyone else seemed to glide effortlessly through a maze of unwritten social rules. My family, supportive but perplexed, tried their best to understand me. But I was the one who loved structure and found comfort in numbers. While social cues flew over my head. As a child, I excelled in class with an unusual knack for details and patterns. But that made me the odd one out among my peers. My sense of humor and straightforward communication often puzzled them. Over time, I discovered a knack for analysis, and this ability to see patterns in life's chaos would later prove to be my saving grace. Books and movies gave me a way to relate. Characters like Rain Man felt familiar to me, not in every way, but in the sense of being different yet having something valuable to offer. Remember Dustin Hoffman's role as Raymond Babbitt in Rain Man. It was one of those rare times I could see my world on screen. He showed the audience what it was like to live with autism, to notice things others miss. Like Raymond, I could seem distant, sometimes a bit rigid in expression, but I was deeply perceptive in my own way. The same goes for other quirky characters like Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory. People assumed I was like the stereotypical tech whiz or math genius, yet here I was, trying my best to fit into an average life. I don't respond to subtle hints like others do. Social signals like checking the time or a half smile go right past me. My conversations come from a place of logic and structure, which can make social situations complicated. People in my life saw my world as black and white, driven by facts over feelings. It's why I was a high achiever in school and later a dependable employee with a love for clear goals. After my parents passed away, I was raised by my grandparents, who often found themselves scratching their heads over my curious outlook. They'd raised 6 kids, but none of them asked questions like I did, or landed in the principal's office as often. I was the kid who wanted to know why we'd have an anti-bullying week instead of promoting kindness year-round, or why taller kids stood at the end of the line in fire drills. I was an academic standout, yet I heard my grandpa mutter more than once, "There's just something different about this boy." Dating in high school wasn't on my radar. Girls' indirect ways didn't register with me, and frankly, the mind games I'd seen other guys fall for seemed baffling. I stayed focused on things I could understand. Grandpa, being a practical man with a military background, decided to hire a professional for my 18th birthday. What can I say? I was thrilled, and when I could save up, I made visits as a typical teenage boy would. It was during one of these visits that I found my first real novel. That day, I was filling my car's gas tank near a shopping center before beginning my Meals on Wheels shift, a requirement for the scholarship program I was in. This wasn't a good deed for me. It was simply part of the routine. Yet it turned out to be something I enjoyed. Each senior on my route had stories of survival, of wars fought, of lives shaped by history. These people became my real-life storybooks, their tales like first-hand history lessons that came to life with every delivery. I was at the gas pump that day, getting ready to hit the road, when a girl sprinted toward me. She was chased by 2 men, one big, one small, a kind of mismatched duo. They circled my car, which was still at the pump, and then she jumped into my car, locking the doors. The 2 men, red-faced and shouting, banged on my car. The store clerk was on the phone, likely calling the police when I decided to step in. "Hey, back off from my car!" I shouted at them, keeping my voice as calm as I could manage. The smaller one looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "Is this your car?" he demanded, voice filled with authority he hadn't earned. I just stared back at him, silent. "Open the door, idiot!" he barked. "We need to get this girl." "Not a chance," I said calmly. "Let's wait for the police. I need to file a report for the damage you've caused anyway." He tried to twist my arm, and I felt a flicker of frustration. As a kid, my coordination was a bit of a challenge, and the neighborhood bullies took notice of that early on. The teasing was a lesson that life could be rough, and it was my mom's idea to sign me up for martial arts. After a while, I settled on Aikido, a style of self-defense that uses the opponent's energy against them. It turned out to be perfect for me, calm, structured, and only used if the other person initiated contact. When the smaller guy grabbed me, I stayed steady. With practiced ease, I pivoted under his arm, twisting him to the ground with a move that was second nature by now. His friend tried to rush me, arms wide like he was ready to tackle me, but I sidestepped him, guiding his momentum to the ground. Dot. The girl in my car was laughing, her voice muffled but cheering me on from inside. Meanwhile, I focused on the situation. This was no time to lose concentration. The smaller guy was back up in seconds, brandishing a taser. I'd never practiced with a taser in mind, but I dodged as best I could. When he lunged, I twisted his arm and pushed it into a bucket of windshield fluid sitting nearby, delivering a shock that left him twitching by the pump dot. When the bigger guy pulled out a collapsible baton, I deflected his strikes using a nearby scraper. I wasn't sure how far this was going to go, but I didn't have to wait long to find out. The smaller guy lifted his pant leg, revealing an ankle holster. He drew a pistol, aiming it squarely at me. "Stop right there," he barked, his voice edged with real anger now. I could see two flashing lights as two police cruisers pulled up. The officers jumped out, tools drawn, yelling at me to drop my weapon. I raised my hands, releasing the taser, but not before the smaller guy threw one last kick that connected hard with my head. Everything went dark. Dot. When I regained consciousness, I was staring at cold, gray walls in a holding cell. It was nothing like the movies. There was no one rushing to let me make a phone call, no polite explanation of my rights. Instead, I found myself seated in a chair, handcuffed, my head throbbing. The two men, who I now suspected were some form of corrupt law enforcement, took turns delivering a few choice hits while I was bound, leaving me bruised and in a daze. Whatever respect I'd earned on the playground for flipping two guys quickly wore off here. Dot. By the second day, it seemed like the guards started to realize things might not add up. One of them, a guy named Anthony, came into my cell with a hesitant look. "Come with me, please." Crossing the threshold, I saw two figures waiting outside, a girl, dressed much like she had been that day in my car, and an older, distinguished-looking man. The guard shifted uncomfortably beside me, eager to make sure they saw he'd treated me just fine, as he kept saying, like he had no part in what had happened before. Dot. The judge ignored him, his gaze fixed on me. He reached out, tilting my head slightly to examine the bruises on my face, pausing on a particularly nasty one on my cheekbone. The girl held up her phone, taking pictures of the damage. She gave the guard a hard look. "Must have taken a lot of you to rough up a man in handcuffs. Real brave of you all." The guard cleared his throat nervously. "Everything's been above board, sir," he said, clearly addressing the judge, who just waved him off. "Enough," the judge said, his voice calm but commanding. He looked at me and said, "Let's get you out of here. We have a lot of work to do to take these guys down." With that, he turned and led the way out, and I followed, a little dazed by what was happening. The girl stuck close by my side, looking back to glare at the guards as we walked away. Soon, we were sitting in a waiting room outside the police commissioner's office, watching men in suits walk in and out, papers and files in hand. The girl leaned over and whispered, "You okay?" "Yeah," I replied, wincing a little as I moved. "Do you want a drink?" the receptionist asked from her desk. "Watermelon juice if you have it," I said automatically without thinking. Dot. She looked at me, perplexed. "We have soda, tea, and coffee, no watermelon juice." I raised an eyebrow. "But you said anything." "That's misleading." The girl laughed, cutting me off before I could take it any further. "Just get him a soda, please," she said, nudging me toward a chair. "You're something else, you know that?" I sat down, still a bit out of it. "I don't even know what I'm supposed to be here for," I said. Dot. The girl smirked. "Probably because you didn't get to finish what happened at the gas station. I'm Dawn, by the way." I looked at her ID badge and gave her a confused look. "But your badge says New Dawn." "Technically, yes," she sighed. "My parents were hippies, so they named me New Dawn, but you can just call me Dawn." I chuckled. "Sure thing, Dawn. I'm Anthony." She tilted her head, amused. "So, Anthony, you really don't know what happened after the cops arrived at the gas station?" I shrugged. "I assume you're about to tell me." She rolled her eyes. "Well, the cops were so busy handling you that I managed to slip away and hide. When those two guys went inside to talk to the clerk, they missed the fact that I was outside recording them the whole time." She held up her phone with a smirk. They threatened the clerk, but they didn't realize I was watching. I got it all. That's useful, I replied, leaning in a little. They didn't even identify themselves when they attacked me. Exactly, she said. And when I saw your Meals on Wheels stuff in the car, I knew I had to call them and let them know what happened. Her grin was mischievous. I told them to send lawyers, tools, and money. I looked at her, mildly impressed. So, the judge is on the board of Meals on Wheels? She nodded. He's not just a board member. He's the chief judge for the district and the biggest political figure in the state. He's got enough pull that when I called him with what I had, he basically rallied the troops. People were in his office that night, some still in tuxedos from whatever event they'd left. He got you out. She paused, touching a bruise on my cheek gently. Those 2 officers? They were planning to lose you in the system. They'd keep delaying the paperwork until your bruises healed. Then it would just be their word against yours. They even planted evidence in your car to make sure the charges would stick. Before I could process that, the commissioner's assistant came out and motioned to me. Anthony, the commissioner will see you now. The meeting was swift but effective. The commissioner reviewed the evidence, watched the footage Dawn had taken, and promptly dismissed the 2 officers. It turned out this wasn't the first time they'd had complaints filed against them. The police department settled with me fairly quickly, offering a generous settlement to avoid further legal action. I wasn't motivated by money, but it felt good to have things set right. Days later, Dawn appeared at my door, grinning. Come on, Anthony, she said, glancing around my modest apartment. I heard about your settlement with the police. Let's go celebrate. I shrugged. It's just money. Dawn shot me a look. So, spend some on me. I had to deal with those 2 goons too, you know. Come on, let's go to dinner. And that's how we ended up at one of the city's nicest steakhouses. I was flipping through the menu when she pushed it aside, making a face. What's wrong with the food here? I asked. She looked at me, horrified. I'm a vegetarian, Anthony. Is there anything on this menu that hasn't suffered horribly? You're a vegetarian, I asked, taken aback. She nodded, explaining her reasons as I listened with a mixture of confusion and amusement. Finally, I repeated one of my grandfather's lines. You know, the original meaning of vegetarian was bad hunter. Dawn scowled at me but couldn't keep from laughing. You're impossible, you know that? It didn't take long for us to start dating. Eventually, she moved in with me. We were opposites in many ways. She with her ideals, her activism, always involved in protests and causes, and me, content in my quiet life with my routines. But she made me feel like life was an adventure, and in turn, I think I grounded her in ways she needed. As time went on, we made things official. We got married, settled into our new life together, and soon enough, our first child was on the way. I threw myself into preparing for fatherhood, devouring books on child psychology and baby care. But Dawn, true to form, insisted on going her own way. She was a force of nature, driven by her own beliefs and passions, and I loved her for it. When our daughter was born, I experienced something new, a deep, lasting purpose. I was thrilled to be a father and took on as much of the parenting as I could. Dawn, meanwhile, was busy with rallies and causes that seemed to pop up every week. She cared, of course, but she was always drawn to the world outside our little family. We managed to balance it, or so I thought. Life had its ups and downs, but I believed we were building something solid, something worth holding on to. But then came our second child, a boy, and not long after, my life took an unexpected turn that would test everything I believed about family, love, and loyalty. When my son was born, I was overjoyed. His big sister adored him, and I felt like our family was complete. I took a new job at a smaller bank in a quieter town down south. The position paid less, but the hours were better, and I wanted to spend more time with my family. Life wasn't glamorous, but we had what we needed, and I felt proud of how my kids adapted to the changes. My daughter thrived in public school, and my son loved having a yard to run around in. Dawn, though, seemed less happy. The lifestyle shift hit her harder than it did any of us. Gone were the European vacations, the private schools, the luxury cars. It seemed like she resented the simpler life, even though the kids and I were happier than ever. One night, After a long day, I came home to find Dawn in our bedroom, packing a suitcase. The sight stopped me in my tracks. Going somewhere? I tried to keep my tone light, even as a strange feeling twisted in my stomach. Dawn barely looked up as she tossed another outfit into the suitcase. I'm heading to New York to support Occupy Wall Street. Occupy Wall Street? I asked, struggling to keep up. Dawn, we just moved here. I just finished my probationary period at the bank. The kids are in the middle of their school year. We can't just leave everything behind right now. She sighed, clearly annoyed. Anthony, I don't care. I'll only be gone for a few weeks. This movement needs me. I felt a wave of frustration, but tried to keep my voice calm. We need you here, Dawn. The kids need you here. They've already had so much change. We can't just leave them without you for weeks on end. Don't be such a child, Anthony, she replied sharply, as if I was the one being unreasonable. Our daughter can look after herself after school, and Janet, the woman from your bank, she has a nanny who can watch both her child and our son until you're home from work. I stood there, stunned by her casual dismissal of our family. Dawn, this is ridiculous. You're not a soldier going to war. This is just a protest. She waved me off, already focused back on her packing. Anthony, you just don't get it. This is bigger than you or me or even our family. This is about change. I have to be part of it. I tried one last time. Dawn, they're just going in circles down there. This isn't going to change anything. Can't you just be here with us? She snapped her suitcase shut and glared at me. You don't have to understand, just accept it. It felt like a slap in the face. I took a deep breath, barely holding back the anger boiling inside. Fine. You're going to Manhattan to protest, but the kids are staying here. They need stability. She gave a dismissive laugh. Anthony, don't act like you can control this. I'll figure something out. I met her gaze, keeping my voice as steady as I could. If you go, don't expect things to be the same when you come back. I'm serious, Dawn, she paused, her expression hardening. I'll do what I want, Anthony. You can't stop me. That was the last time we spoke before she left. I didn't even hear her go. She didn't say goodbye to the kids. She was just gone, for a while. I tried to explain it to them as best I could. I told them that she was up north helping with something important, that she'd be back soon. But as the days turned into weeks, it became harder to hold on to that story. Then, one day, my daughter came home from school with tears in her eyes. She'd found a video online of Dawn protesting. It wasn't just any video either. It showed her living in a tent with another man, laughing and holding hands with him, as if they didn't have a care in the world. My daughter looked at me, her face full of confusion and hurt. Dad, she said, her voice breaking, everyone at school is calling her things. It's all over the internet. They're calling her names. It's so embarrassing. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to protect her from this, shield her from the ugliness of it all, but the truth was out there and there was no taking it back. A few days later, I finally managed to reach Dawn on the phone. Anthony, she said, sounding annoyed, why are you calling me so much? I took a deep breath, struggling to stay calm. Dawn, do you have any idea what this is doing to the kids? Everyone at school is talking about you living in a tent with some random guy. She scoffed. Don't be so dramatic. No one cares about that stuff. Well, our daughter does. She's dealing with this every day, hearing things about her mom. She's humiliated, Dawn. There was a long silence on the other end. Anthony, she finally said, her tone cool. Maybe you're just blowing this out of proportion. Kids are resilient. I couldn't believe her nonchalance. Dawn, they need you. I need you. This isn't just about some movement, it's about us, about our family. She sighed, her voice laced with irritation. Look, if this is so hard for you, maybe we can do counseling or something when I get back, but right now I have to focus on what I'm doing here. That's not good enough, I said, my voice steely. There's a bus ticket waiting for you tonight. If you're not on it, I'm filing for divorce. She laughed. Oh, come on, Anthony, you're not actually serious. Watch me. The line went silent, and for a moment I thought she might actually be considering it. But she didn't come home. And so a week later I filed for divorce. She called me when she found out, furious, demanding an explanation. Anthony, how could you do this? We have a family. You can't just throw it all away because of a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I replied, trying not to laugh. You left us, Dawn. You left your own children. That's not a misunderstanding. She tried to argue, but I'd made up my mind. She wanted her freedom, and I wasn't going to stand in her way. I just didn't want to be part of it anymore. The divorce was brutal. Dawn fought for every last dollar, draining our accounts and pleading poverty in front of the judge. She twisted things to make herself look like the victim, and I was left to pick up the pieces. But the one thing I held on to, the one thing I refused to give up, was custody of the kids. I wasn't going to let her leave them behind again. In the end, she got most of our money, leaving me with little more than the roof over our heads. But I didn't care. She may have won that battle, but I had my kids, and to me that was worth more than any amount of money. After the dust settled, I slowly began to rebuild my life. I focused on work, on my kids, on making a stable, happy life for us. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that was enough. Then one day, out of nowhere, there she was again. Dawn appeared on my doorstep, a wide smile on her face and a new man on her arm. She was holding a camera, already talking about some book deal she'd secured, about how she wanted to write a story about us, about how she was going to share our journey with the world. I shook my head. Dawn, there is no us. There hasn't been for a long time. She looked taken aback, as if she couldn't understand why I wouldn't just go along with it. We could make so much money, she pleaded, trying to win me over. Think about it, Anthony. We could be famous. People love stories like ours. I looked at her, really looked at her, and all I could feel was a deep, profound sadness. She was chasing something that didn't exist, something that never had existed. She'd left her family, abandoned her responsibilities, and now she was back, hoping to cash in on the wreckage she'd left behind. No, Dawn, I said quietly. You don't get to do this. Not with me. Not with our kids. I closed the door on her, leaving her and her camera crew on the porch. It was the last time I ever saw her, and somehow I felt lighter for it. I'd closed that chapter, put it behind me, and I was ready to move forward. From that day on, I focused on building a life for myself and my kids, one that wasn't weighed down by her chaos and drama. I wanted something real, something stable, and finally, I felt like I was on the right path. In the months after Dawn left for good, life began to settle down. I poured myself into my work at the bank and made a real effort to be there for my kids, who were still adjusting to all the changes. It wasn't easy, but we were making it work. My daughter was blossoming, her grades improving, and she seemed more at ease now that Dawn's influence wasn't clouding things. My son, still young, was just happy to have more time with me. Then, one day at work, I was called into my manager's office. The atmosphere was tense, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. My manager looked at me seriously, and I braced myself. Anthony, he began, I'm going to need you to cover for me tomorrow. You'll be acting as manager for the day. It was unexpected, but I didn't think much of it. Sure, I can handle that. He nodded, looking at me with something like gratitude. Thanks. It's a big responsibility, and I know you're capable. The next morning, I arrived at the bank early, going over the procedures and double-checking everything. I was feeling confident, ready to prove myself. But as fate would have it, that was the day everything went sideways. I had just stepped into the men's room when I heard raised voices outside. When I came back out, I saw two men in ski masks standing in the lobby, brandishing what looked like weapons. My employees were lined up against the wall, and one of the robbers was holding our elderly security guard in a headlock, pressing something that looked like a grenade against his head. The robber closest to me turned and yelled, "Are you the manager?" I tried to keep my voice steady as I replied, "Yes. What do you need?" The robber sneered. "All the money in the bank. Now." I took a deep breath, assessing the situation. I didn't want to provoke them, but I couldn't just let them hurt anyone. "The cash is still in storage. We haven't transferred it to the vault yet," I said, gesturing toward the back room. The taller man, who seemed to be the leader, shoved one of the tellers, Janet, forward. She stumbled, and I could see the fear in her eyes. The robber pulled her close, holding her by the waist with one hand, the grenade in the other. "You're going to show us where it is," he growled, nodding at me to lead the way. My heart pounded as I led them toward the back of the bank, trying to keep a clear head. I knew this part of the bank inside and out, and an idea started to form. Once we were in the storage area, I tried to maneuver them into a corner, hoping to contain them there. The taller robber noticed my hesitation. "What are you doing? Open the storage area now!" I took a deep breath, pretending to reach for the lock, but instead I turned around and went for the robber's wrist. He stumbled back, surprised by the sudden movement, and in the chaos, the grenade slipped from his hand, bouncing across the floor. Janet let out a scream, and everything seemed to slow down as the grenade rolled to a stop. My mind raced. I remembered enough from my old Aikido classes to know what I needed to do. I lunged for the grenade, grabbing it and sprinting for the vault. If I could just get it shut in there, it might contain the blast. I ran as fast as I could, throwing open the vault door and hurling the grenade inside before slamming the door shut. Just as I locked it, the grenade went off. The blast reverberated through the metal, and I was thrown back, hitting the floor hard. Pain shot through my arm and leg, and my vision blurred. The next thing I knew, I was surrounded by paramedics, one of them holding a flashlight to my eyes, checking for a concussion. I could hear voices around me, some talking about the robbers being apprehended, others discussing the extent of my injuries. Everything felt surreal. "Stay still," a paramedic said as he adjusted the brace on my arm. "You're lucky to be alive." I was taken to the hospital where I underwent surgery for injuries to my arm and leg. The doctors told me I had done serious damage, but that with time and physical therapy, I should recover most of my mobility. I had also sustained a few fractures and burns, and they warned me that I'd be dealing with some pain for a while. The next few days in the hospital were a blur of doctors, nurses, and visitors. My daughter and son visited often, along with some colleagues from the bank. Janet came by too, bringing flowers and a card signed by everyone. I could see how relieved she was, and I reassured her as best I could, telling her that I'd heal and that everything would go back to normal soon. One day, as I was resting, my bank manager showed up. He sat beside my bed, shaking his head in amazement. "Anthony, you're a hero! You saved lives that day." I tried to downplay it, saying I had just done what I thought was right, but he wouldn't hear it. "You'll always have a place here, Anthony," he said firmly. "What you did, people will remember this." He left me with a sense of pride and accomplishment, but also with a strange feeling of unease. I knew that this experience had changed me, and I wasn't sure what that would mean for my future. On the day I was discharged, Janet offered to drive me home. She had been there almost every day, helping me with everything from bringing my kids to visit to making sure I had clean clothes. We had become close during my recovery, and I found myself enjoying her company more than I'd expected. As she helped me settle back into my apartment, Janet handed me a small envelope. "The bank's giving you a reward for your bravery," she said with a smile. I opened it to find a check for a substantial sum. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was enough to make things a bit easier as I continued my recovery. I thanked her, feeling grateful not just for the money but for the support of the people around me. Janet and I spent more time together in the months that followed. She introduced me to her 2 sons, and our kids got along well, forming friendships that grew with each visit. Before long, it felt natural to invite her over for dinner, and soon, those dinners became regular occurrences. I wasn't sure when it happened exactly, but at some point, Janet had become an integral part of our lives. She was there for the little moments, the after-dinner conversations, the late-night talks when the kids were asleep. And somewhere along the line, I realized that I felt more for her than just friendship. One evening, as we sat on my porch watching the sunset, I turned to her and took a chance. "Janet," I said, my voice low, "I never expected to feel this way again after everything that happened with Dawn. I thought I was done with relationships. But you make me want to believe in love again." She looked at me, her eyes softening, and she reached out to take my hand. "Anthony, I feel the same way. I never thought I'd find someone like you, someone who accepts me and makes me feel valued." We sat there in silence for a while, our hands entwined, watching the last light fade from the sky. In that moment, I knew that despite everything I'd been through, I had found something real, something worth holding on to. With Janet in my life, Things started to feel like they were finally falling into place. The kids were happy, school was going well for both of them, and Janet and I had this effortless connection that made me feel at ease. Life felt simpler and honestly better than it had in a long time. Then one afternoon, out of the blue, Dawn showed up at my front door. She looked different, thinner, maybe a little worn out. She wore a forced smile and her tone was overly sweet. "Anthony, hi. I heard about everything. The bank incident, the promotion, it's all over the papers," she said, her gaze shifting around as if she were searching for something. "Thanks, Dawn," I replied, keeping my tone polite but guarded. "What brings you here?" She looked down, fidgeting with her purse strap. "I was just thinking, maybe we could talk? You know, for the kids' sake." I let out a slow breath, keeping my cool. "We can talk, sure, about the kids." Her face fell a little, but she quickly masked it with a bright smile. "I've been thinking, maybe we could try being a family again? For the kids, it could be like old times." I felt a strange mixture of disbelief and frustration. After all the time she'd been gone, after everything she'd put us through, she was here now, talking about being a family again. "Dawn," I said, keeping my tone calm. "I think the kids have found a good routine here. They're happy and they're doing well. You can visit them, of course, but I've moved on. We both have." She didn't seem to like that answer, but before she could say more, Janet appeared in the doorway, holding a tray of lemonade and giving me a questioning look. I introduced them, and Dawn's face registered a flash of surprise before she recovered. "Oh, you must be Janet," Dawn said, her tone cool. "Nice to meet you." Janet, ever the gracious one, gave her a polite smile. "It's nice to meet you too. The kids have told me so much about you." There was an uncomfortable pause before Dawn cleared her throat, forcing a tight smile. "Well, I should go," she said, glancing at me one last time. "I'll be back in town next month. Maybe we can talk more then." After she left, I couldn't shake the strange feeling her visit left behind. Janet gave me a sympathetic look and placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "She doesn't seem like she's really moved on," she said softly. "No," I replied, "but I have, and that's all that matters." A few weeks later, Dawn's visit seemed like a distant memory. Life returned to normal, and things between Janet and me grew even stronger. We were finding our rhythm as a family, and I started to envision a future with her and the kids. Then, one evening, as we sat around the dinner table, my daughter brought up something unexpected. "Dad, can we talk about Mom?" she asked, her face serious. I set down my fork, bracing myself. "Of course. What's on your mind?" She hesitated, glancing at her brother and then at Janet. I don't understand why she left us and now she keeps showing up like everything's fine." Her question took me by surprise. For so long, I'd tried to shield her from the full truth, not wanting her to feel the pain and confusion that I had. But it was clear that she needed answers, and she deserved to know what had happened, at least to a certain extent. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "Your mom, she made some decisions that hurt us, and it took me a long time to understand why. But the important thing is that we're here now, and we're building something strong together." She nodded, looking a little relieved. "Thanks, Dad," she said quietly. "I just wanted to understand." After that, the conversation shifted back to lighter topics, but I could feel the weight lifting. The unspoken questions finally addressed Dot. Over the next few months, Dawn's attempts to reconnect grew more insistent. She sent messages, occasionally showed up unannounced, and tried to play the family card, always acting as if nothing had happened. One day, she even brought a camera crew with her, saying it was for a new docuseries she was working on. It was supposed to be about healing and reconnecting with family, as she put it, but it felt like an invasion. I refused to participate, firmly but politely, and eventually she left in a huff, the camera crew reluctantly following. Later that evening, I explained what had happened to Janet, who just shook her head with a wry smile. "She really doesn't know when to give up, does she?" It was true. Dawn seemed determined to keep herself in our lives, not out of genuine love or regret, but out of some need for attention and validation. And it was starting to wear on all of us. Finally, I decided to have a real conversation with her. I called her and asked her to meet me at a coffee shop, hoping that a public place would keep things civil. When she arrived, I didn't waste time with pleasantries. Dawn, we need to talk about boundaries. Her face fell and she looked down, fidgeting. Boundaries? Yes, I said, keeping my voice steady. For the kids' sake, you're always welcome in their lives. But you need to understand that I've moved on, and our family, Janet, the kids, and I, we're happy. She nodded, a hint of sadness in her eyes. I miss what we had. I know, I replied, feeling a pang of sympathy. But you can't hold on to the past, Dawn, and you can't disrupt the life we've built. If you want to be part of the kids' lives, that's fine. But you have to respect our boundaries. She took a shaky breath, then nodded. I'll try, she said, though I could tell it wasn't the answer she wanted. After that, Dawn's presence in our lives gradually faded. She still visited occasionally, but her attempts to reconnect lessened, and the kids seemed to relax, as if a weight had been lifted from their shoulders. With Dawn's influence finally diminished, our lives became peaceful and steady. I was able to focus on my work, Janet, and most importantly, the kids. We built new traditions, spent weekends exploring nearby parks, and gathered for family game nights that became a regular highlight of our week. One evening, as we sat around the table, I looked at each of them, Janet laughing at something my son said, my daughter engrossed in the game, and I realized that I had everything I needed. The scars from the past were still there, but they didn't hurt anymore. I looked over at Janet, who caught my eye and gave me a warm, knowing smile. She understood without words. In her, I had found a partner who accepted me for who I was and embraced the life we were building together. We'd been through so much, each of us carrying our own burdens, but together, we had created a life that was filled with peace, laughter, and love. And as I sat there, surrounded by the people who mattered most to me, I knew that I had finally found my home. After Dawn faded from our lives, a sense of stability took root. It wasn't that things were perfect. Family life always had its ups and downs. But Janet and I had found our rhythm, and the kids were flourishing in this new environment we'd created together. I could see that our home was becoming the safe, welcoming space I had always wanted for them. One afternoon, I came home from work to find my daughter waiting for me in the kitchen. She had that serious, thoughtful look on her face that I'd come to recognize whenever she had something important on her mind. Dad, she began, fiddling with her sleeves, I want to tell you something. I put my bag down, giving her my full attention. Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind? She hesitated, glancing down. I know you and Mom didn't work out well, I know that was hard for you, for both of you. But I just want you to know that I'm happy you and Janet are together now. Her words took me by surprise, and I felt a surge of warmth. I reached over, squeezing her hand gently. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. That means a lot to me. She gave me a small smile. I see how happy you are with her, and she's great with us. I wanted you to know that we're all okay. I'm okay with it. It was one of those rare moments where the past, with all its difficulties and heartbreak, felt like a distant memory. My daughter's words brought a sense of closure, a reassurance that I'd made the right decisions not only for myself, but for the family we'd rebuilt together. In the weeks that followed, I focused on spending quality time with the kids. Every weekend, Janet and I made it a point to do something special with them, whether it was hiking, exploring a museum, or simply having a movie night at home with popcorn and blankets spread across the living room floor. Those moments were simple but meaningful, and I could feel the bond between all of us growing stronger with each shared experience. Janet and I talked often about the future, discussing the things we wanted to build together. We considered marriage, though neither of us felt any rush. What mattered most was that we were committed to each other and to the family we were nurturing. Marriage was a possibility, but we were already living the life we wanted. Then, one evening, as we were getting ready for bed, Janet brought up a topic that caught me off guard. Have you thought about the kids' college funds? She asked, looking over at me thoughtfully. I paused, realizing she was right to bring it up. With everything that had happened, I hadn't given their future finances the attention they deserved. Dawn's financial escapades had left me wary of money matters for a while, but now it was time to face it head on. You're right, I replied, nodding. It's something we need to plan for. They deserve the best future we can give them. We spent the next few weeks carefully examining our finances, setting up college savings plans for both kids. I was grateful to Janet for her guidance. She'd worked in financial services before, and her experience was invaluable as we navigated the best options through it all. Janet was steady, practical, and reassuring. She had this way of turning stressful situations into manageable tasks, breaking down every worry into a plan. It was one of the many things I admired about her. One sunny Saturday, we decided to take the kids to the local park for a picnic. We packed sandwiches, snacks, and a thermos of iced tea. As we spread out a blanket under a big oak tree, I watched Janet with the kids, her laughter blending with theirs. Seeing her so naturally comfortable in that role filled me with gratitude. We spent the day playing frisbee, laughing, and just enjoying each other's company. At one point, my son, who had been quietly observing, looked at me with a serious expression. "Dad, are you and Janet going to get married?" The question took me by surprise, and I looked at him thoughtfully before answering. "Do you want us to get married?" He shrugged but smiled shyly. "Yeah, I think it would be nice. She's like a mom to us, you know?" My heart swelled at his words. I glanced over at Janet, who was busy arranging the sandwiches, and I knew that whatever our future held, it would be built on a foundation of love, trust, and mutual respect. As time passed, life settled into a beautiful routine. The kids grew older, their personalities blossoming in ways that never failed to amaze me. My daughter's compassion and strength shone through in everything she did, while my son's curiosity and sense of humor brought laughter and light to our home. And Janet, she was my anchor. She balanced me, brought out the best in me, and showed me a level of love and support I hadn't known was possible. I often found myself wondering how I had gotten so lucky, especially after everything we had been through as a family. One evening, as Janet and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and orange, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat in comfortable silence, content in the moment. "This," I said softly, breaking the quiet. "This is all I ever wanted." She looked up at me with a gentle smile. "Me too." For the first time in a long time, I felt that I was exactly where I was meant to be. Every step, every challenge, and every painful lesson had led me here, to a life filled with love, laughter, and a deep sense of belonging. Janet squeezed my hand, and I knew that whatever the future held, we would face it together. We were a family, bound not by blood, but by choice, love, and commitment. And in that moment, as the last light of day faded into night, I felt truly, profoundly whole. The years continued to pass, and our family grew stronger with each shared experience. The kids matured into thoughtful, responsible young adults, and I took pride in every step of their journey. My daughter had developed a passion for environmental science, inspired in part by Janet's influence, while my son, to everyone's surprise, had taken an interest in the arts. Janet and I encouraged their pursuits, proud to see them grow into their unique selves. As the college years approached, I felt a mixture of pride and a pang of nostalgia. It was hard to believe they were already nearing adulthood, ready to spread their wings and make their own way in the world. We had prepared them well, but the idea of them leaving home was bittersweet. One evening, as Janet and I sat on the back patio enjoying a quiet moment, she turned to me with a contemplative expression. "Have you thought about what life will look like when they're gone?" she asked softly, her voice barely louder than a whisper. I thought about her question for a moment, a strange feeling settling in my chest. "I have, but honestly, I can't imagine this house without them. It's going to feel empty." Janet smiled, reaching for my hand. "It will be different, that's for sure, but it doesn't mean it has to be empty. It just means we'll have time for other things, maybe even more time for ourselves." Her words made sense, and I realized how much I'd come to appreciate this next phase of life with her. We had navigated so many challenges together, and the idea of spending more time focusing on our own dreams and goals felt exciting, even if it was hard to let go of the kids. As the days went on, Janet and I began to make plans. We discussed traveling, something we'd both always wanted to do but hadn't found the time for. We talked about seeing new places, learning new things, and even considered starting a small project together, a business, or maybe a blog where we could share our experiences with others. The kids, aware of our budding plans, teased us about becoming world travelers or social media influencers. Their playful jabs only fueled our excitement, and we found ourselves looking forward to the next chapter in our lives. One Saturday, as we were packing up our son's belongings to take him to his dorm, he turned to me with a hesitant expression. "Dad, there's something I want to tell you," he began, his voice quiet. I set down the box I was holding, giving him my full attention. "Of course, son, what's on your mind?" He took a deep breath, his gaze steady. "I know you and Mom went through a lot, and I've seen how hard you've worked to make things right for us. I want you to know how grateful I am for everything you've done." His words hit me deeply, and I felt a lump form in my throat. "Thank you," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. "That means more than you know." We stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of his words settling around us. In that instant, I felt a sense of pride, not just in him, but in the journey we'd shared as a family. All the hardships, the challenges, and the difficult choices had led to this moment, a testament to the strength of our bond. With a final hug, we loaded the last of his things into the car and made our way to his new dorm. It was a day filled with excitement, nerves, and a hint of sadness as we left him to start his own life. Janet held my hand tightly on the drive home, understanding the emotions I was experiencing without needing to say a word. Over the following weeks, the house felt quieter, emptier, but not in an unpleasant way. Janet and I adapted to the slower pace, filling our days with new projects and plans for the future. We began taking weekend trips to nearby cities, exploring art galleries, trying new cuisines, and even visiting historical sites. Every trip was a small adventure, a chance to see the world from a new perspective. One evening, after a day spent exploring, we sat in a cozy little cafe, sipping on cups of tea as we watched the rain patter against the window. "Do you ever think about the way things used to be?" Janet asked, her eyes reflecting the soft light of the cafe. "All the time," I replied, nodding, "but I don't dwell on it. Every part of my life led me here, to this moment with you. I wouldn't trade it for anything." She smiled, reaching across the table to hold my hand. "I feel the same way. Sometimes I can't believe we ended up here, together. It feels like fate, almost." I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Our lives had taken so many twists and turns, but each one had brought us closer to this moment of contentment and peace. One day, as we returned home from another small adventure, I found a letter waiting for me. The handwriting was familiar. Dawn's. I opened it cautiously, unsure of what to expect. Inside, the letter was short, an unexpected message of apology and reflection. She admitted to her mistakes, acknowledged the hurt she'd caused, and expressed a desire to make amends, if only to find peace within herself. As I read her words, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. The anger and betrayal I'd once felt had faded over the years, replaced by a quiet sense of closure. Dawn's apology, though belated, felt sincere, and for the first time, I found myself willing to let go of the bitterness I'd held on to for so long. Janet noticed the letter in my hand, her gaze questioning. I explained its contents, sharing my thoughts and emotions with her. She listened patiently, then placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but it can be a step toward freeing yourself from the past." Her words resonated, and I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I decided to forgive Dawn, not for her sake, but for my own. It was time to let go, to fully embrace the life I had built with Janet and our children. With each passing day, Janet and I grew more content, more at ease with the life we had created together. Our travels continued, and we embraced every new experience, every new adventure with open hearts. Through the years, our family grew, as the kids started their own families and brought new joys into our lives. Janet and I became grandparents, a role we both embraced with excitement and love. Watching our children become parents themselves brought everything full circle, and I couldn't have been prouder of the legacy we were building. In quiet moments, I would reflect on the journey that had brought us here, the lessons, the struggles, and the love that had carried us through. Every step had been worth it. Every challenge a stepping stone to this life of fulfillment and happiness. Janet was right. The future held endless possibilities. We had created a life filled with love, laughter, and resilience, and no matter what lay ahead, I knew we would face it together, hand in hand, just as we always had. Years rolled by in a tapestry of rich, quiet memories. Janet and I continued to enjoy the rhythm of our life together, embracing both the familiarity of routine and the excitement of occasional new adventures. Our days were spent exploring the world, learning new things, and finding joy in the little moments that punctuated our journey together. One crisp autumn morning, as I sat with a cup of coffee on our porch, watching the leaves fall, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. My life, once filled with tumult and heartache, had transformed into something steady and meaningful. Janet joined me, her hand warm and reassuring in mine. We sat in silence, letting the stillness of the moment fill us with a quiet joy. Our children, now adults, were thriving in their own lives. They visited us often, bringing laughter and energy into our home. Our grandchildren added a new layer of happiness, their boundless curiosity reminding us of the beauty of youth. Each visit was a celebration, filled with stories, games, and the warmth of family. One evening, after a family gathering, our daughter pulled me aside. Her eyes held a mixture of admiration and something else, understanding, perhaps. "Dad," she began softly, "I've always wondered how you managed to stay so strong through everything. You never gave up on us or yourself, and you found happiness again. I just want you to know how much that means to me." Her words stirred something deep within me, and I hugged her tightly. "Life has its challenges," I replied, "but it also has its rewards. You and your brother, you were always my reason to keep going, and meeting Janet was my reminder that love can come around twice, in ways you never expect." She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek as she hugged me again. In that moment, I felt the journey had come full circle. The struggles, the pain, and the growth had all been worth it, not just for my happiness, but for the legacy of resilience I had given my children. As Janet and I grew older, we found new ways to embrace life. We volunteered at local organizations, traveled to places we'd always dreamed of, and filled our home with memories and mementos from our travels. Our life together became a testament to the power of love, patience, and understanding. Evenings were often spent reminiscing, sharing stories from our past, and laughing over shared memories. Janet would lean into me, her head resting on my shoulder, and we would sit there, savoring the quietness of a life well-lived. One night, as we sat together on our porch, I looked at her, my heart swelling with gratitude. "Janet, I never thought I'd have a life like this. You brought light into my darkest days, and I'll always be grateful for you." She smiled, her eyes twinkling with that familiar warmth. "We saved each other, Anthony. That's what true partners do. We build each other up and make each other's lives better." In that moment, I knew she was right. We had built something beautiful together, a life filled with love, family, and a resilience that nothing could shake. In the later years, as our steps slowed and our hair grew silver, we leaned even more on each other. Our days became simpler, filled with peaceful walks, shared books, and cherished conversations. Our home became a sanctuary for us, a place where every corner held memories and every room echoed with laughter. The love we had built together continued to flourish, stronger than ever, a quiet but unwavering presence that sustained us through every season. We watched as our grandchildren grew, celebrated milestones with our children, and welcomed new chapters in their lives with open arms and open hearts. On one particularly clear morning, I found myself reflecting on everything we'd experienced together. From the painful chapters of my past to the joy and peace of my present, I saw how each moment had shaped me, guided me, and led me to this very place. Life had taken unexpected turns, but in the end, it had given me everything I needed. With Janet by my side, I felt complete. As the years wore on, Janet and I spent more time surrounded by family, our home always filled with the sounds of laughter, conversation, and love. Our children and grandchildren brought life into our days, and we took joy in every moment we shared with them. One winter evening, as we gathered around the fireplace, our family around us, I looked at Janet, and she looked back at me with a knowing smile. No words were needed to convey the depth of our connection or the gratitude we felt for the life we had built. In that warmth, surrounded by love, I realized that life had given me everything I'd once thought I'd lost, and more. Janet had shown me the power of second chances. Our children had taught me the strength of unconditional love, and our family had given me a reason to keep striving, to keep hoping, and to keep loving. As the fire crackled and the room filled with the stories of our lives, I knew that my journey, with all its ups and downs, had been worth every moment. I was exactly where I was meant to be, and my heart was full. In the end, I found what I had always been searching for: peace, love, and the comfort of a life well lived, and for that I would be forever grateful. Here's the next story. There, quote, a conflict going on in my head. Love and hatred fight over the same individual. One second I am devoured by love. The next is a hatred so strong that it scares me. They say you can't feel both at the same time, but I understand better now. I want to awaken from this nightmare, get back to normal, to return home to a family that is not shattered. But those days are past. Thursday is decision day, and this must come to an end in some form. Maybe I'll be able to sleep finally. Perhaps then I can live again. Since I had drawn the short straw, it was my responsibility to retrieve the next bucket of drinks from the kitchen fridge. There were roughly 9 minutes to halftime, and our college team was up 3 points after trailing for the majority of the first half. They were about to score on the 32-yard line, and no one wanted to leave the TV. So we decided that the person who drew the short straw would get the next round of beverages and food. You can't truly enjoy the big game without something to drink, right? Especially not this devoted set of devotees. It was our regular Saturday gathering, and everyone was having a fantastic time with Keith's new 52-inch 3D television and surround sound. It felt almost as if we were at the game. In fact, it was probably better because we had all of the conveniences of home without the crowds. This time, Keith and Rhonda hosted our little football party, and they went all out. The only difficulty was that the food were stacked high on the dining table. Everything I wasn't meant to eat during the diet. My wife served me a few BBQ chicken wings. It won't hurt, I thought as I grabbed a couple when no one was watching, along with 2 jalapeno poppers stuffed with cheese. After a week of salads and skinless chicken, I deserved this weekend. I told myself I had refilled the food platter for the boys before returning to the living room. We grew up together. We attended the same high school and college, and Keith and I even played football together our freshman year. That was before we discovered we were simply not good enough. Not to mention the time commitment required to join the team. After graduation, we all ended ourselves living within 5 miles of one another. Years later, we are all married and as close as we have ever been. Roger and his wife Beth have 1 child. David and Sue recently had their 2nd child, and Sue joked that it would be their last. Keith and Rhonda lead our group of 3 children. Heather and I have 2. Robert is 6 and Amy is 4. We just celebrated our 9th wedding anniversary a few weeks ago. A great supper, beverages, and a relaxing night while the in-laws looked after the kids. Made for an absolutely memorable evening. I was almost in the kitchen when I heard the laughter. It was loud and harsh. I knew immediately away who was laughing. My wife's chuckle can generally be heard from 2 rooms away. Even though the game was loud in the living room, I knew the others must have heard it. Our females would always meet in the kitchen to drink, tell stories, and catch up with one another. I placed the final food into my mouth and slowly stepped closer to the doorway to hear what was so hilarious. "He cannot be that horrible," Sue exclaimed, smiling, and looked at my wife. Honey, I never said he was bad. At least not anymore. It took me 5 years to show him what to do. So if there is responsibility, it falls on me. Everyone laughed at this. Except for me. "Heather, you have 2 children, so he must be doing something correctly." Rhonda added, "Girls, he was simply lucky." Heather said, and everyone laughed again as Beth replenished their wine glasses. Look, Steve is a wonderful father and devoted husband, but he might use some assistance as a partner. Roger is shy and quiet around most people, but he is really loving. Beth spoke with a flush. "I only wish he would pay more attention. That's all," she said jokingly. All of the other spouses agreed that they wished their husbands were more involved, too. "I have something on my nightstand that could help you with that," my lovely wife stated. "It's a fascinating device. When I'm feeling bold and there's no one around, I go on unbelievable adventures." Heather sipped her wine and fanned herself with a napkin. "You are aware of what others have said." "There is no finer lover than yourself," Brian. Rhonda inquired, confused. "Brian is the name you choose for your gadget. He was an old boyfriend who I will never forget. He knew exactly how to start a fire, and the right touch could make anyone feel great. At this moment, I was really upset. These were our closest buddies. And here was my beloved wife, giving all these personal facts about us. Now, comma. Suppose Steve and I are having a bad moment. I remember my time with Brian. The memories keep things intriguing. How much worse could things be? I thought about her casual remarks regarding our life. Maybe I will discover my own Brian. Sue laughed when she and the others noticed me standing in the doorway. The mood in the room shifted instantaneously. Heather turned around to see what everyone was staring at and gave me a beautiful grin. "Hello, honey, can I get you anything?" She spoke in her normal, kind tone. I had a wave of frustration and disappointment. "Do not come home. I don't care if you remain with one of your sisters, your parents, or anywhere else. But don't return home if you know what's best for you." With that, I turned to walk toward the living room and front door. As I proceeded through the home, I heard my name screamed out several times. Everyone in the kitchen caught up with me just as I entered the living room, where the males were cheering for something. There was nothing to celebrate about. "Hey, where is my drink?" David asked when I returned empty-handed. "Roger, please move your car so I can get mine out," I said, trying to maintain my cool. "Please hold on," he said, still focused to the television. "They're going for a 2-point conversion. Roger, if you don't move your car now, I'll just push it into the street as I warned." My expression must have indicated how serious I was. "Come on, Steve, give me a second," he explained, reaching for his jacket to retrieve his car keys. "Honey, simply relax. It was only a joke." Heather responded hastily, clutching my arm. She wasn't expecting what occurred next. I turned and gently pushed her back. Heather stumbled slightly before sitting down. "Don't ever touch me again. Do you understand?" I raised my voice, feeling my face turn a blazing scarlet. I'd lost control of my temper. Who could blame me? I exited the room full of stunned individuals and proceeded toward my car, Roger following closely behind. He presumably didn't want to risk damaging his new red Lexus. Everyone on the front lawn watched as I drove away, heading home, which was just a mile away in the next community. I was very irritated. I was shivering and sweating, yelling at Heather with every derogatory term I could think of. These weren't simply strangers. I'd known most of these people for nearly 20 years. What were her thoughts? Here was the lady I loved speaking about me in a way that felt betraying, mentioning how wonderful Brian had been. If Brian was so amazing, why did she not marry him? That's correct, Brian was somebody I couldn't stand. And now I had even less cause to reconsider my decision. For once, I wished we lived farther apart. Driving like running typically helped me relax. But I wasn't sure a long drive would help right now. Walking inside an empty house was a welcome change because I did not want to talk to anyone. My mind felt fried, and I needed to regain control and calm down. I paced across the kitchen and living room, taking my first drink in 3 fast gulps. The second drink took a few seconds longer. I gazed at the third drink in the fridge, unsure whether I should open it. Then I remembered Heather's remarks regarding Brian, so I opened it. My phone rang continuously until I switched it off. When Heather was unable to reach me on my cell phone, she began phoning the house phone. I let the answering machine handle the first few messages. Steve, this was simply a prank. Please come back to pick me up so we can discuss. I heard the phone strike the kitchen wall at the same time as the answering machine, which was a joke. It seemed as if I were the punchline. We had just celebrated 9 years together, and I believe we were both thrilled that night. I suppose I was incorrect. Was she thinking of Brian again? My irritation mounted. I'd completed my 3rd beer. I'd already had 2 drinks before everything happened, so I was at my limit. I didn't drink much anymore. Not in the past 10 years. Heather thought I was a messy drinker, so she had me cut back. I used to limit myself to 5 drinks every day, but tonight was different. I have a long rum and Diet Coke in my hand. I had eliminated sugary drinks from my diet. I went upstairs to our bedroom looking for anything Brian-related. To my surprise, I noticed 3 objects in the bottom drawer of her nightstand. They were extremely huge and unexpected below. I also discovered some other products, including a citrus-flavored One Dot. It seemed as if a different planet had emerged in our home while I was away. I drank more. I wanted to let her know how I felt. Instead of yelling, I took everything I found in that drawer. I opened the front door and arranged them nicely on our front step for anyone to see. Then I closed and locked the door. I knew Heather wouldn't care about me tonight, but I'd been worrying about Brian for the past hour and a half since I arrived home. I had managed to destroy our home phone and answering machine, lock all the doors, unhook the garage door opener, get a great buzz going, and remove her belongings from the house. Not bad for 90 minutes of labor, Dot. Then I heard the doorbell ring repeatedly, followed by beating on the front door. "Stephen, please open the door," I heard Heather pleading from the outside. I peeked out the living room window and saw her on the front steps. Beth and Roger sat in his car in the driveway. I opened the door but left the safety chain on Heather, "What do you want?" I asked. "I thought I had made it plain that I did not want to see you." I told Steve, "I know you're upset with me right now, but you have to understand that I didn't mean it. I guess I had too many drinks. Please, sweetie, open the door. We need to talk." A little upset. I figured if I was only slightly unhappy now, she wouldn't want to see me when I was really angry. My thoughts raced with memories of past movies. "Heather, please go away. I do not want to talk to you, and I'm not letting you in. Why don't you take Brian and his friends somewhere peaceful and quiet?" I'd had enough and slammed the door, I quote, but not sure how long she, Beth, and Roger spent outside. I went upstairs to what used to be our bedroom and felt quite ill for the next half hour. By the time I felt better, my stomach was empty. After spraying cold water on my face, I entered the bedroom and plopped down on the bed. I told you I'm not a big drinker. Sunday morning was really peaceful. It was nearly 9 a.m. when my brain decided to wake me awake. Our bedroom faced east, with the blinds up and the drapes open. The sunlight was working hard to keep me from sleeping too much. My head hurt and my mouth felt horrible. I awoke still dressed, including my shoes, lying on top of the bedspread Dot. When I reached for my wife and didn't see her, my mind swiftly reminded me why. I became frustrated all over again. When we married, I knew Heather had had some previous relationships. I had only been with 2 individuals before her, both for a short time. I wasn't too experienced, but I hadn't realized Heather had so much more experience than me, Dot. Perhaps I should have asked my former partners to tell Heather what they thought of me. Looking back, I wondered if they would have said something kind. I started doubting myself and feeling unworthy. Her words yesterday were quite hurtful. She did not simply hurt me in front of our friends, she made me lose confidence. I never thought I wasn't meeting her requirements, all these years. It felt like she was concealing her actual emotions. What hurt more was that she was thinking about someone else. I couldn't express how embarrassed I felt. How could I face my friends after what had occurred? Anger poured over me. She not only stole my self-esteem, but also drove me away from my closest friends. I made it through Sunday without drinking or even checking my phone. I knew Heather had certainly left me a lot of messages, but she was the last person I wanted to hear from. I knew Heather would have to come home and enter the house on Monday after I went for work. She and the children would require clothing for job and school. I needed to prepare myself to cope with her after work if I decided to return home. Monday was difficult for me. For the first hour, I just stared at my computer screen, which displayed a photo of Heather and me on our honeymoon at a beach. We seemed quite joyful. After that, I found a few small activities to keep me occupied till lunchtime. I was grateful for a budget meeting and a conference call in the afternoon to take my mind off of everything. It wasn't until around 5 p.m. that I had time to reconsider my condition. I couldn't stop thinking about Saturday afternoon, and every time I remembered what she said, I felt enraged all over again. I knew we'd need to discuss. I just hoped it would be later, not sooner, because I had a lot of issues to cope with. As I drove home, I prayed she would not be present. I wanted to see my children, but did not want to dispute with her in front of them. Well, I'll find out soon enough. I drove down our street. Great Dot. When I spotted Heather's car in the driveway, I was annoyed. The children were playing outside and dashed to my car as I parked. "Dad, We are baking our own pizzas for dinner. Mom is in the kitchen preparing all of the toppings and has instructed us to notify you to come inside when you arrive home. I'm going to cook a pizza with everything on it," Robert announced triumphantly. Amy stood next to me and looked up. "How about you, sweetheart? What will you put on it?" I inquired as I lifted her up and kissed her cheek. "Just cheese." "Daddy," Amy replied with a smile. "Okay, I'll go help your mom if we want to eat dinner soon." I sat Amy down. "You two play outside and I will call you when dinner is ready." I did not want to upset them. I quietly entered the house. I noticed Heather chopping vegetables in the kitchen. She was still wearing her work clothes and didn't notice me. "Come inside." How long had I not been paying attention? It felt like the majority of my married life. She never spoke a word. If I had known how she felt, we could have worked things out together and grown closer. All I felt was disappointment. She'd caught me off guard. I could only imagine what my friends thought about me right now. My rage was rising again. "There's no time like the present," I thought as I walked into the kitchen. I dropped my laptop on the table, causing Heather to jump. "I didn't hear you enter," she said. Then she started with the same excuses I'd heard the previous few days. I quote, "So sorry. I must have blanked out on Saturday. I was the one who interrupted her first. Don't try to explain it away. We both know it was not second. Everything that happened after was an attempt to change what I had clearly heard. I am still in shock. Who are you? You're not the person I thought I married." She took a step towards me. Steve, please listen to me. "Heather, save your excuses for someone who cares because I don't anymore." Her eyes were filling with tears, but that didn't change how I felt. It was like I was looking at a stranger instead of the woman I thought I loved, Steve. It was just a friendly chat. Talking and sharing our feelings is what friends do. You must remember Beth sharing her troubles. You know you have it worse than her. Are you saying we are both having a hard time? Beth only said her husband was eager but wanted a bit more closeness. You, however, made it clear that I did not meet your hopes. Weren't those your exact words? Yes, but I didn't mean it that way. You mean it's even more complicated? Why did you marry me if you felt like that? My voice got loud and shaky. Oh, right. Brian wasn't the type to settle down. He was good for fun, but not for being serious. Isn't that right, Steve? You're misunderstanding everything. I love you. Sure, like I can trust that anymore. At that moment, our kids ran in from outside asking when dinner would be ready. Soon, kids. Why don't you go upstairs and wash your hands? By the time you come back, we will start making our pizzas. They zipped up the stairs. Steve, we really need to talk this out. Sorry, but you fooled me for so long. I can't believe anything you say anymore. Tears started to fall again. We didn't have time to talk more because Robert and Amy came rushing down the stairs, their hands still wet from washing. Luckily, they were there to keep us busy. Dinner was loud as the kids played with different toppings on their pizzas. I didn't feel very hungry. I tried to act normal and ate 2 small pieces. We had no drinks in the house, and even if we did, I wasn't going to drink tonight. I needed to keep my mind clear for what might happen later. Everyone helped clean up in the kitchen. By 7, the dishwasher was on, leftovers were packed away, and the kids enjoyed chocolate chip cookies and milk for dessert. Afterward, they and I went to the den to watch TV. I wanted to avoid being alone with Heather again. She joined us later, but picked a chair instead of sitting on the couch with us. For the next hour, she focused on me. I could feel her thinking like she was planning her next move. Her past efforts to change my mind had not worked, and I was firm on standing my ground. I thought about leaving for a motel, but we couldn't afford it for long, and I didn't want to be away from my kids. Our 3-bedroom house didn't have a place to escape, so I considered my options. Since we had no basement and the garage was out, I decided to stay in the den. The small room had only a regular couch and 2 big chairs. Sleeping on the couch wouldn't work, so I turned to the inflatable bed we kept for guests. My mind was racing. I knew that when Robert and Amy fell asleep, Heather would come looking for me again. I needed to get ready for that. Around 8:30, when the kids had finally gone to sleep, I started to make my own plans. Steve, we need to talk, Heather said as I was getting the inflatable mattress ready. About what? I think I've heard enough already. I replied, Honey, I tried to explain that it was all a misunderstanding. I don't think you're missing anything. she said, looking serious. She seemed to know how serious her past mistakes were. I kept getting the bed ready. "What are you doing with that?" she asked, realizing what I was setting up. "Steve, come to our bed, Dot. We can work this out," Heather pleaded, reaching for me as we walked towards the den. I turned away and she quickly pulled her hand back. "The only reason I'm still here is because of Robert and Amy. If it were up to me, I'd rather be anywhere else. But I can't afford a hotel right now," I said, watching the bed inflate. "I told you, I don't want to be close to you anymore. The idea of it makes me uneasy." "Did you think I was joking?" she started to reply. My frustration boiled over. "If you keep this up, I won't stay here much longer. Heather, we're on very different paths now." She took a step back, clearly surprised. "You have your own things to find comfort in. I need some space. It's clear there have been secrets, and I understand things better now. If you don't mind, I'd like to set up my new sleeping area," I said, turning my back to her as I put sheets and a blanket on my new bed. When I looked back, she was gone. I didn't sleep much better on Monday night than I had on Sunday. I was still upset and had more questions than answers. I thought we had a good connection at the start. I felt pretty average, but I figured most guys were like me. From what I saw at the gym, I wasn't trying to compare myself to anyone there, but maybe I should have my confidence was strong until Saturday because I felt I was handling my duties, so I assumed I was questioning everything about our marriage. What more was she hiding about our relationship? It hurt that she never opened up to me, and now I struggled to trust her. I couldn't stop wondering if she'd ever been unfaithful. I assumed not. But now I couldn't be certain. The remainder of the week was challenging. We didn't even act like normal housemates because even roommates communicated with each other. My rage had subsided a little, but I started to see her differently. She was now only the mother of my 2 children. I nearly dreaded Fridays because they meant spending the entire weekend at home with Heather. The kids would be there, but I was concerned Heather would want to discuss how we lived together today. On Saturday morning, the children ate cold cereal while I ate coffee and toast. Heather didn't enter the kitchen until nearly 9. I was just finishing up when I informed her that I had left her coffee in the pot. I couldn't tell how she felt, and I wasn't paying close attention to her. I simply wanted to leave the kitchen, so I went out into the garage to find something to do. I tried to avoid her till dinner. I grilled hot dogs and hamburgers, and Heather cooked coleslaw and a bean salad. We finished the day with ice cream and a movie from Netflix. Neither of us actually watched the film. When she wasn't gazing at me, I found myself observing her. She seemed unhappy, and I felt the same way, but I wasn't sure how to solve it, or even if I wished to. I once again slept in the basement den. Despite the fact that I hadn't exhibited affection in over a week, I spent time on the internet with my work laptop and browsed some intriguing websites. I was still a healthy guy. From Sunday through Wednesday, I went through the motions. We talked both while the kids were there and when they were not. I attempted to restrict my time with her. Simply being in the same house felt challenging. It wasn't the only thing getting challenging. On Thursday around 7 o'clock, David called. "Hey, buddy, do you want to get a drink with me and some friends?" he asked. "Sure," I said, and I went out the door in my 30s without saying anything to anyone. Rick's bar was located on 10th Street, just 3 miles away. I made it there shortly. David must have called from the bar as he, Roger, and Keith were already halfway through their beers. "Bring my pal to Corona, will you?" David informed the bartender. I grabbed the bottle and took a big drink. "Wow, that tastes great. Based on what Sue has told me, I believe you may need to leave for a bit. Are things still tense at home?" David asked. "It's quite tight. We live in the same house, but we are very different in many aspects. She has her own bedroom, while I have mine. The youngsters have a feeling something is awry. Luckily, they're too young to fully comprehend what's happening." "Have you two spoken at all?" Roger asked. "Heather speaks, but I don't trust much of what she says. Would you believe me if I said I didn't see this coming? Now I'm not sure why she married me." I finished my first beverage. The bartender swiftly served me another drink. Roger said, "For what it's worth. Beth believes Heather is unhappy and regrets she had not spoken what she did. Let us be honest. The only thing she desires is that she had not been apprehended. If I hadn't been standing in the kitchen doorway, I would have been completely oblivious, just being led about." My irritation was building up again. Are you and Heather still going to attempt to fix things? Keith asked again. Rhonda feels horrible about what happened at our house, but she believes you should move on. I warned her that if she said anything like that about me, it would be a serious deal. What don't these women get? We all agreed. Right now, I'm not sure if I want to reconnect with her. I still care about her, but she isn't who I thought I married. Roger drank a shot of whiskey and shared his opinions. A wife should not say negatively about her spouse, especially in public. If she has an issue, she should speak with him, not our pals. Beth and I recently fought over something she said. If she wasn't happy when we first met, how come she married me? Exactly, I exclaimed in agreement. Beth did say great things about you, though. Mine just said I wasn't enough. I suppose she became adept at expressing exactly what I wanted to hear over time, that I believed her when she stated I didn't make her happy anymore, I told my friends. David then shared his suggestions. Don't do something that you can't fix. I understand you are hurt, yet you still care for her. Please give it some time. Don't let Heather upset you or force you into anything you'll regret later. We continued to drink and converse for a few hours before returning home to our own families. Everyone but me. I no longer saw Heather as a loving partner. Where have you been? I was concerned about you, Heather replied as I entered the kitchen through the garage. I simply had a few beers with pals, I replied calmly. I did not want to discuss tonight. Well, you left so swiftly that I suspected something was wrong. I'm delighted you're back. If you want to talk, I'm here. She smiled at me, but it didn't feel right. Perhaps later. Right now, I just need to sleep. Heather tried to smile and appear pleased as I entered the den, but I couldn't sleep. I hadn't gotten a good night's sleep since all this started. I'd give anything to go back to that Saturday afternoon and draw the long straw. Then I wouldn't have heard what was going on in the kitchen. What if I am still unaware? It would be so much better than what I was going through now. I still loved my wife very much. I felt overjoyed whenever she gazed at me with those adoring eyes. But now that she tries to look at me in that way, I can't help but wonder what she actually wants. I worry if I can make her happy, and if she is thinking about someone else instead of me. The following 3 weeks passed slowly, and I scarcely remembered what happened at home. I guess I was getting used to the way things were today. Heather still wanted to resolve our issues and move on. She even pushed me to go back to the way things were. I kept telling her I wasn't prepared, but she didn't seem to hear me. It wasn't like I snatched Heather from him. I was told that she chose to move on after a rough weekend. We both had a significant number of friends in college. We knew each other's names and faces, but not particularly well. Heather struck me as gorgeous from the moment I saw her. I had a special place for blondes, and her blonde hair drew my attention right away. Then, when I stared into her sparkling blue eyes, I felt enchanted, like a young boy falling for the girl of his dreams. Back then, I was casually dating someone else, but after I saw Heather, I forgot about her. I can't say I was infatuated with Heather, but I always managed to chat to her at gatherings. I smiled, charmed, and took advantage of any opportunities that presented itself. That was until Brian began to feel left out and attempted to draw me back. Brian and I were pretty dissimilar in appearance. He was tall and attractive, with long, dark hair and a stubble on his chin. He frequently went to the gym instead of class, proudly flaunting his six-pack to every girl he encountered. I can't recall ever seeing him have his shirt fully buttoned. On the other hand, I stood around 5'10" and had short brown hair. Let's just say I was quite average in many aspects. The main difference was that I was smart and Brian was not. Did I say I wasn't bad-looking? I went to college with one objective in mind: to graduate and earn a nice job, rather than struggle as my parents did. They never attended college and wanted me to have the opportunity that they did not have. I could not let them down after everything they had done for me. So, after giving up my dream of being a football great, I devoted all of my efforts to my academics. By the end of my junior year, I had a flawless 4-point grade average. I hoped I was heading somewhere. That summer, I had the opportunity to perform an unpaid internship with a small marketing company. At first, I felt a little out of place because I was young and had little experience. After the first week, I found everyone to be quite pleasant. I felt more at ease, as did some of the others. I have fantastic ideas that would propel the organization to great success. No way. I was only an intern. My role was to remain quiet, assist others, and learn from those who had worked there for many years. And this is exactly what I did. Most people worked hard, and several went above and above what was asked of them, but no one appeared to be really motivated. They'd been there so long that simply doing their job prevented them from getting fired. So they had gotten a little lazy. Not me. I wanted to demonstrate what I could do. It took the majority of the summer, but I eventually expressed some of my ideas. They encouraged me to stay beyond the new year, but I told them I needed to finish my degree first, and then, naively, impress a girl. Fortunately, Brian remained his normal self over the summer, and Heather was becoming increasingly frustrated with him. Steve, where were you? I have missed you, she said with a smile that warmed my heart. I did a marketing internship and worked at a printing company at night to pay for this year's tuition. How about you? Do you still see that guy, Brian? I knew his name, but I wanted her to consider going out with me. I suppose we're still seeing each other, she replied, carefully glancing at me. Too awful. I was going to ask if you wanted to join me at the jazz festival at the park by the river on Saturday. There will be Cajun cuisine, chilled beverages, and amazing music. It will be a fantastic night. I was hopeful and waited for her response. As she shifted her weight and peered into my eyes, the seconds felt interminable. Pick me up at 6 and don't tell anyone we're going together, okay? She said, Steve, I have to leave now. I have a class in 20 minutes. See you on Saturday. The delicate touch on my cheek revealed all I needed to know. I didn't need to say anything else. Saturday night was incredible, and I couldn't stop smiling. We ate, drank, listened to music, and walked along the river. I was the perfect gentleman all night. Around 11 o'clock, we walked back to her apartment together. I wasn't let in, but the sweet goodbye made me feel on top of the world. As I returned to my parents' house, I felt unsteady, but smiling Heather was much out of my league. She had a charm that drew everyone's attention. She had fallen for someone who did not deserve her, and I knew I needed to do everything I could to win her heart. I only needed to be patient and be close. I expected the other individual to make a mistake at some point. We spent at least every other weekend together. Forget dinner and a movie. I made sure we did something exciting and different. We had a surprise picnic at the planetarium, took a massage lesson, tried producing wine, and even went on an overnight supper train excursion. She rested her head on my shoulder, and I enjoyed having her near me. We were designed for one another. She was 5'7" and fit wonderfully in my arms as we danced. Even though I'd only seen glimpses of her, they were enough for me. I've got tickets to the New York Ballet Company for Sunday afternoon. I told Heather Thursday night. There was a long gap, and I did not like the expression on her face. Brian and I are heading away for the weekend. Otherwise, I would love to join you, she said, sounding a little melancholy. That is okay. I'll just find someone else to go with. I couldn't even muster a smile this time. Maybe we can go the next time they're in town. She started to say something, but stopped herself several times. Yes, next time for sure. Look, I need to go. I quote, we got a lot to do. I got a short kiss for my trouble, and she was gone. Barb was renowned for being daring when she was intrigued, and she occasionally took partners away from others. Heather didn't like her. Barb had spoken with Brian more than once while Heather was right next to him. So, who went to the ballet with me on Sunday? Barb was intelligent and could communicate well. We both dressed well and had a terrific time. I could have continued the conversation after dinner, but I wanted to be respectful in front of her door. We exchanged a quick kiss, and I realized her charm was genuine. She welcomed me in, but I declined. If I had said yes, I might not have gotten home. That night. I was excited and wanted something special and memorable. When Heather returned, I mainly ignored her for the first half of the week. It did not take long for her to discover that I had taken Barb to the ballet. When she noticed me having lunch with Barb at the student union on Wednesday. She looks at a lot. Heather and Brian had been arguing a lot by Sunday, according to a few friends. When he raised his voice, she spoke up for herself. I guess I had a lot better weekend. On Wednesday evening, I was upstairs at the library studying for an upcoming extremely difficult statistics test. I was quite focused when I heard someone softly call my name. Steve, do you have a minute? It was Heather. Sure, have a seat, I said quietly, and we exchanged smiles. I was wondering if you have any plans for the weekend, she inquired politely. Heather was from Mississippi and could easily use her welcoming charm, which she was doing a lot tonight. "Well, I'll be helping Barb study for her math test on Friday night, but I'm free on Saturday night," I said, feeling slightly uneasy. I could tell she wasn't pleased that Barb was still around. "Okay, do not make any plans on Saturday night. You and I are going out." She said it as if it was already determined. "How about Brian? I thought you two were still together. Do not worry about Brian. You and I are going out on Saturday and we will have a great time, okay?" Looking back, I should have realized how determined Heather could be when she wanted something. She was determined, and it was difficult for me to say no to her. Barb was never seen again after that Saturday. Heather made sure of it. We were clearly a couple, even in the presence of others. Brian had done his part, so Heather was now mine, and I wanted to keep it that way. As I previously stated, I was the 15-year-old boy who had the girl of his dreams. I was deeply in love. 3 weeks later, in her cozy apartment, we shared an experience that drew us closer. I was both excited and amazed. By the end of the night, we felt like the only two people on the planet. The following 6 months were filled with happiness. We had spent so much time together that we felt like one. I learned to appreciate everything about Heather, and I thought I'd found the perfect companion for my joy. She loved adventure, and we pursued many of my dreams together. Heather was always eager to try new things, and I was delighted to accompany her on these adventures. We took the time to understand and make each other happy, and it was a lovely, carefree time. Looking back, I realized that I frequently changed my plans for her in response to her requests for special care or relaxation. I was there for her, but my own needs didn't always get the same attention. She would frequently hesitate about certain things, even when I was eager to please her. I proposed to her just 2 months before my graduation date. I believe she answered yes before I even finished my question. I had a good job lined up, and Heather was only 2 semesters behind me, so we would soon begin our lives together. Weddings can be stressful, and ours was no exception. She envisioned a lovely celebration, which her family helped to realize. I felt relieved when it was all over. We discussed having children, but decided to wait at least 3 years to settle down first. I was in love, and I believe that says it all. She meant everything to me, and each year I felt happier when our children were born. I thought we got even closer. A year later, I was promoted and was able to qualify for a home loan based solely on my salary. We were extremely happy. I had a loving wife, a wonderful family, and good friends to share my life with. It seemed like the kind of life that most men would want. But then something changed. "Steve, will we go to Roger and Beth's this Saturday? Everyone is bringing their children, so there will be no need for a babysitter. Beth probably wanted our kids around to keep me under control after what happened last month. Sure. Why not?" I said I was glad to leave the house and see some friends. Please try not to cause any trouble this time. I realized it was a low blow, but I wanted Heather to remember. She started the mess, and it was far from over. The car ride on Saturday was peaceful until Robert and Amy began fighting in the back seat. "If you don't stop, we'll go home." "Got it?" I said firmly, even though I knew we wouldn't really go home. "Just be quiet, and we'll be there in 10 minutes. I glanced at Heather, who was watching me closely. She leaned over and whispered, "Please don't make a scene today. I know you're still upset with me, but for the kids' sake, let's keep things calm. She wanted a peaceful afternoon. As usual, the men watched the game while the women were busy elsewhere. This time, instead of drawing straws for drinks, Roger offered to go. Everyone knew they didn't want to see me clash with Heather again. It was a nice afternoon, even with the tension in the air. The women huddled in the kitchen. The kids played outside, and we guys just enjoyed the football game like we did in college. I tried to keep things light and joked around with the others to avoid serious topics. "Steve, you still single?" Keith joked. "Or are you still handling things yourself?" He laughed. "Don't you think you should ask Rhonda instead? A gentleman doesn't share his business." My answer made the other guys laugh and tease me a bit. I chuckled when Keith called me Lucky Dot. "But to answer your question," I said, looking around before I continued, "we're still not together. Isn't it time to move on? If Sue had said something like that, I'd be enjoying my weekend much more," David said, puffing out his chest. "Talk is easy," a few of us said. We all knew Sue wouldn't give in, even if she was wrong. Plus, David wasn't the type to push it. He was on the shorter side, just a little over 5'6". Sue was a bit taller than me and taught fitness classes at the local gym. She seemed strong and confident. You can keep thinking that, I said, wanting to change the topic away from myself. Our team lost by 2 points, but I still had a good afternoon. We only saw the wives when they brought out the food. Everyone started eating right away. The kids were told to stop playing and eat, but like usual, they grabbed some bites and rushed back outside. We all chatted while we ate, but no matter how hard we tried, there was still a heavy feeling between Heather and me. We smiled and acted normal, but I could tell we weren't fooling anyone. On the way home, I glanced at Heather. She was staring out the window and twisting her hair. I really wanted to know what the wives were talking about in the kitchen that day. Most of the guys thought I was right to feel worried about Heather's earlier words, but they didn't know how I should deal with it. Except for David, who thought I should just talk things out. But coming from him, it didn't mean much. I get close with my partner at least 4 times a week without asking. Sue just hints that she wants some love. And what could I say? That I'm too exhausted? No way. I enjoy such moments. And if that makes me extra caring, then so be it, he said, sounding a bit too proud for my liking. Later that night, once the kids were in bed, Heather started a chat. Honey, do you want to have a chat? I could sense from her tone that she meant something deeper than just a discussion. What the heck? I thought the day had gone well, but I wondered what was coming next. I was drifting back into my typical naive mindset, so I shrugged and accepted. I know I've apologized several times, but I truly mean it. We were all joking about our husbands, and I get carried away. You suit my needs. Believe me, I'd know if you didn't. So if that's true, why do you approach others? If I am enough for you. I knew my query would change her compliments. Steve. If you understand, I sometimes have feelings that only I can deal with. It's a little personal, but I hope you understand. Oh, I understand, I responded, observing Heather's smile widen. Is that when you start thinking about other guys? If Brian is one, who are the others? What are you thinking about, Steve? I remembered how much that bothered me before. I quote, V never treated you unfairly. Actually, I felt that way at times. I just wanted to know if there were any other males. Was your mind preoccupied with other things after we became engaged during those late-night study sessions? I would never cheat, Heather. I believe we have different interpretations of what cheating implies. Are you saying you've never considered being with another woman? Come on, you're not as innocent as you seem. Maybe I only have a little. But I would never do anything while I am with my wife. I was angry again. Steve, I love you. Can't you see it? I want us to be as we were before anything happened. Heather, I also want that, but I can't get my mind off what you stated so effortlessly. You insist it was only chatter, but I'm starting to wonder if you were serious. It's difficult to tell if you're being honest. I don't know how to get past this. So, I have an idea, she remarked, grabbing my hand and guiding me inside our bedroom. To me, she was still the most gorgeous lady I'd ever seen. I fell in love with her the first time I saw her, and my feelings became stronger with each passing day. I stood there as she began to take off her clothes. I longed to be near to her again till she approached me and whispered, "Come here, my sweet man. I need you tonight." These were the exact words she said on our 8th wedding anniversary. That night, I believed I had made her feel unique and was the only man for her. But then I wondered how many times she'd said those words to Brian. My feelings shifted and I lost the yearning for connection. I apologized. I said, "I can't do this tonight," and turned away. "Come on, Steve, you've got to try. We haven't seen each other for a month." She couldn't stop talking, so I could think. I turned back, feeling even more unhappy. We both know it has been more than a month. Try 10 years. You should have done a better job instructing me. That felt like a major blow. Heather then eased off, bothering me only a few times a week rather than every night. I was attending to my own needs, and I assumed Heather was finding her own way to deal with things. Heather told me on Thursday that she was going out with her friends on Friday and wanted me to watch the kids. They are also my children, therefore I didn't mind at all. Yes, I will probably take them out for pizza or something. Just don't let them stay up too late, she replied, smiling unnaturally. That night was hard. She left in jeans, a casual top, and sandals, without telling me where she was headed. I could have contacted her phone, but I saw no purpose. She was going out to have some fun, which she wasn't getting enough of at home. She and her buddies arrived to our house shortly after 1 in the morning. I had no idea who drove them, but I prayed it wasn't any of the 3 people I saw in the living room. When I stepped into the room, they all appeared to be rather inebriated. They appeared to be calling their husbands to come fetch them. Heather, are you and the girls fine? I asked. They laughed and told me they had drank too much. Listen, do not bother your husbands. I will drive you all home. I'm awake anyway. See, I told you he was the kindest guy around. Heather informed the other 2 wives, and just so you know, I did not go close to anyone tonight. You can question them or observe for yourself if you prefer. The other 2 women claimed they had not gotten close to anyone either. Roger and Keith will be pleased to hear this. I had no idea why they were telling me this, but I went along with it. I assisted all 3 of them get into my car. Heather refused to stay at home despite my requests. They both lived within 2 miles, and it only took me 10 minutes to drop them off at their doors. Heather was assuring me that she was still committed to me. Really? You can verify if you don't trust me. I don't mind, and I'd probably find it amusing, she replied as she got closer to me. Heather, you are intoxicated, and I need to drive, I said, attempting to explain as she drew in closer. Okay, I'll wait till we get home, you party-pooper. She was quite inebriated. It took me 10 minutes to get her out of the car and another 10 to help her climb the stairs. She approached me and was quite nice while I was assisting her with her bedtime routine. I hadn't seen her in so long, and she looked great. Do I still love my wife? Maybe, but I had mixed sentiments. It began with a simple kiss and progressed into much more. Tonight I felt engrossed in the moment with her. After a while, she settled down next to me and promptly fell asleep. I covered her with a sheet. I walked downstairs to get myself a glass of wine. I am upset with myself for feeling vulnerable. It felt good to connect, but I knew that when Heather awoke on Saturday morning, she would believe everything was well between us, which it was not. Before Heather awoke, the kids were up, fed, and watching cartoons in the den. Despite having showered, she still appeared unkempt. Nonetheless, she returned downstairs with a large smile on her face. After what occurred last night, I expected you to still be with me this morning. She still smiled. Heather, we spent some time together yesterday night, but nothing more. Well, it's a start, right? I'm not sure what it is anymore, I said. I questioned why I did what I did last night. Look, I understand we have problems, and it's all because I wasn't thinking clearly and didn't appreciate the best thing that ever happened to me. I will do anything, do you hear me? Anything to get past this. She rose up and came over to me. Her eyes filled with tears as she hugged me tightly and cried on my shoulder. I was irritated with her, yet I still cared. Later that morning, I found myself resting beside her. I was trying to figure out how I had landed up here again. This time, however, I wanted to make it unique. I wanted to create a lasting memory and show her how much she meant to me. I focused on staying close to her and enjoying our time together. That day, we connected in ways we hadn't before. I was astonished by how strong our bond felt when it was finished. She lay back, breathing heavily, and I hoped she would remember this time fondly. Suddenly, I was stopped by a loud knock on our locked bedroom door. It was almost midday, and we were called. I prepared grilled ham and cheese sandwiches, one of their favorites, along with a drink of milk and a bowl of chips. They were joyful again. Why is Mom still in bed? Is she sick? Robert asked, food in his mouth. Do not talk with your mouth full. No, your mother is not unwell. She had a late night and is now having a sleep. If she didn't get up soon, I would have to go food shopping alone, which I didn't want to do. Amy was fine, but Robert desired everything he saw. He didn't comprehend what no meant. Heather was dressed by the time she came down. Even if she had come down in a different manner, I was not going to let it happen again. It felt amazing after 6 weeks apart, but it did not feel like a husband and wife were close. It felt like we were simply meeting a temporary demand. Heather prepared to head to the grocery shop. We seemed like a happy family. Despite the fact that we were still dealing with challenges, we talked and joked. I grabbed a few chickens for supper, a large bottle of wine, and a 6-pack of beverages. I'll probably need it later tonight. Dinner was nearly usual. Everyone spoke, including Heather and me. This time, we didn't only talk about the kids. After supper, I didn't want to see the movie that the kids choose Dot, so I decided to complete a few tasks around the house that I had put off. Heather strolled in as I was fixing the sink. "Steve, what were you up to this morning?" she asked. I didn't respond. I just continued tightening a valve that was slowly leaking. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed it, but it was very different from you. I paused for a bit, wondering whether Heather liked it or not. I could feel my frustration building. I stated I liked it, but you seemed to be trying to prove something. It wasn't the closeness I'm used to with you. I walked out from beneath the sink. The shocked look on her face when she noticed my emotions made me think of something else. Dot, what are you doing? Comparing me to the old me. Can you make a decision? First, you say I'm not good enough and that you need more from me right now. When I try to become greater, you're still not satisfied. Heather, what do you really want? Because frankly, I have no idea. And I'm finished trying. The water could wait. I would not be sleeping in our room or the den tonight. I packed some clothing into an overnight bag and walked to the garage. Fortunately, the kids were still watching a movie and did not witness our dispute or my angry exit. I was just finished. By 9 p.m., both kids had gone to bed, and I was in the den watching CNN, trying to distract myself from the news outside Dot. For the time being, the world appeared to be more complicated than my own life. I observed her standing at the doorway. I couldn't tell how long she'd been here. She had a blank expression on her face, almost as if she was trying to figure out what I was thinking. "Do you want to talk now?" she asked, almost sheepishly. "Not really, but perhaps we should," I answered, uncertain where to begin. Finally, I handed her the test results. She peered at the pages, then back at me. "I'm not sure what all these charts and lines imply." "Okay, let me give you the short version. To the question, do you love me?" Your response of yes was correct. She grinned confidently as she answered the question, "Dot, did you ever cheat on me?" You said no. And that was also correct. She smiled again, but I remained serious. "I expected your response to the question, was Brian a better companion than me?" It hurt to hear Luke and Steve affirm it, though. I'm not sure what to say. I just wanted to be honest with you, especially after what has transpired. Well, you were extremely clear, especially after mentioning that you occasionally think about other people during our close times. It simply reinforced what I heard you say that day in the kitchen. I sometimes ponder about other males, like when you see someone attractive in the mall or the beach. It's actually the same thing. Heather, I have to disagree. I never thought about making other women happy. Could you say the same? Her expression indicated that I was correct. Steve, you're an excellent companion. Even Brian didn't always meet my needs. Does knowing that I'm not the worst make me feel any better? Do you know how it feels to be told that I'm not enough for you? Steve, I never stated that. I told Luke that you satisfy me. I did not lie. Do you remember? He asked that question twice. She appeared bewildered. Heather? He asked twice. He simply expressed it differently the second time. Like I said, he demonstrated that I was telling the truth, didn't he? Heather replied, inconclusive. He couldn't prove anything with what you said. That does not make sense. But it does. You just mentioned that Brian didn't always meet your needs. If you think he was better than me, Steve, there's no way I could have satisfied you. You are twisting my words. He didn't just ask me a question he couldn't tell was true or not. Was that the one? He didn't speak. I lied when I said yes, that you satisfy me. Did he? No. But he couldn't certify that you were telling the truth either. Stephen Moore. I adore you and know you love me. That is what matters. She was incorrect about these two, just as she was with her last answer. We talked. Or really? She argued with me for the next few hours. She continued telling me I was wrong and that this was all a big issue for no reason. She insisted she loved me, and that was sufficient. Luke had stated that she loved me and wanted to keep our marriage going. The night was long. At 2 o'clock, I told her that my mind was fatigued and I needed to sleep. We slept close, but it didn't feel the same to me. Even though I requested for some room, we were all knotted together by dawn. So much for room. I lay awake thinking about the day before and listening to my wife. Soft breathing. She had completely transformed my perspective on our marriage. Where are we going from here? Should we just pick up the pieces and go on? Could we? Can I? That was the biggest question. And at 7:55 a.m., I still didn't have a clear answer, but my mind couldn't stop racing. Why are you staring at me? My wife inquired as she opened her eyes and spotted me. Am I drooling or what? No, just thinking of us. Are you okay? Better yet, are we all right? I had no response, and as I paused, she realized it was best to leave it alone. She remained quiet, only looking at me. I sensed she wanted to be closer, but didn't know how to express it. Normally, comma. I would have been fine with that, but everything in my life seemed strange. Now. The rest of the weekend was tight, but we got by as best we could. Our children continued to fill the quiet periods. I was ready to return to work on Monday. The next 2 weeks weren't any better. We communicated and acted like a close family, and we had a few moments of intimacy. Heather shocked me for the first time. She exited the bathroom, turned off the main light, and turned on the small lamp on the nightstand. I was just in my boxers and not saying anything. I let them fall. I was afraid I'd lose control as she got closer, but she seemed to want to help me feel more stable again. She moved, and for a brief moment, I felt something. Physically, everything seemed natural. She made the appropriate sounds, and we appeared to be in sync. Even when we held each other afterwards, there was something missing. We both sensed it. I couldn't tell if she was actually with me or just pretending. I couldn't tell previously, and I still can't now. Life felt complicated for the next 8 weeks. I smiled and attempted to repair our marriage. Heather was giving her all, but she remained cautious around me. We didn't actually have a marriage. We were just two people trying not to upset each other. We appeared happy on the outside, but on the inside, we felt empty. I finally spoke up, telling Heather how I felt and leaving no room for her to disagree. Do you want a 3-month break? I don't understand it. I thought things were improving. What exactly do you mean by better, Heather? We discussed nothing important. We did nothing without the kids, and our closeness felt planned. The surprise that we once had was gone. Our interactions were cautious. We frequently checked in with each other rather than simply enjoying the moment. It felt like we were both afraid of upsetting each other. I knew there was a rift in our relationship, and I needed to take a step back to reflect. Are you just going to walk away? What about Rob and Amy? I know we can work out a schedule. It won't be easy, but I simply need some time to think. You want to see if you still want to marry me? Is this it? I didn't respond. There was no need. Are you planning to date anyone while you are away? What should I do while you try to sort things out? Maybe I should leave and see if I want you back. Honestly, Heather, I'm just checking to see if there's anything left for us. If you need to explore while I'm away, that's your choice. I just want to know what's going on. Our conversation became louder, and we both expressed our frustrations. We had a big fight in which we discussed all of our problems. When it was over, I had packed 2 suitcases and was on my way to the Red Roof Inn without my phone. I was uneasy. I wanted to distract myself, but I knew it wouldn't work. Tomorrow was a work day, and regardless of how things turned out, I needed that job to survive. 2 days later, we both apologized. Heather couldn't understand why I had to leave, and she wondered how we could make things right if we were apart. I honestly didn't see how we could solve them together. Every Wednesday, I would pick up Robert and Amy, and we would have family dinners on Sundays. Being away from home became expensive, and I considered returning, but I reminded myself that this would not solve anything. I went out with a few friends on occasion, but they all had steady relationships without Heather. I felt lost among our old friend groups. The women agreed with her, claiming that I simply had a wounded pride. The men believed Heather was being unfair about everything. My self-esteem was very low. After nearly 2 months, I decided I wouldn't return. Heather's words made me doubt my worth in a relationship, and I felt that doubt heavily. Some might say I should just return home, but I kept thinking about what she said that Saturday. What husband wants to stay with a woman who doesn't seem to care about him? You can't be serious. You want to end 10 years of marriage because of something I said when I was upset, Heather said when I told her I was going to file for divorce. I don't want this to be harder than it has to be. I quote, ask for shared custody and we can split everything fairly. I replied, Steve, I'm going to fight you on this. Listen, I do not want a divorce. Can't you see that I care about you? She insisted. I know you care, but I can't be with someone who makes me feel like I'm not enough. It's really important to me to feel valuable in the relationship. I said, Steve, you do meet some of my needs. Sure, things aren't perfect all the time, but that doesn't mean we should end it. Please think about this more, she pleaded. I prepared the initial papers for her to look at and sent them over. Later, I found out she had torn them up without reading them and sent them back through the server I hired. That night, I got an angry email saying that if I continued, she would get her own lawyer. It was clear that things were getting out of hand. Our children were stuck in the middle, and it was hard on them. They looked more quiet and confused, not getting why we weren't all together. Divorce is hard for everyone involved. It was Saturday, and I was at a bar trying to relax. I wasn't feeling great when a woman sat next to me and ordered a drink. We shared smiles and chatted a bit. An hour later, we were at a table laughing and talking. I told her I was married and only wanted to be friends, and she seemed to get it. I actually had fun. And by the time we said goodbye, I felt better. Maybe I wasn't the failure that Heather thought I was. I'm not sure how Heather found out about that day. Someone must have seen us and told her. Heather confronted me, asking who the other woman was and if she was better than her in any way. Heather. We just talked. I didn't do anything with her. I could hear her crying on the other end as she told me how much she loved me and how sorry she was for what had been said. Our lives felt completely out of control. Things got trickier when Heather's father hired a lawyer for her. He said it wasn't personal, but he wanted to protect his daughter. I understood where he was coming from, but that was when our talks went straight to the lawyers. We lost touch, even when I picked up the kids. The tension mounted as threats were made, and soon our final plans didn't look like what we had wanted. A mediator advised we should share everything equally, share custody of Amy and Robert, and sell our home, as none of us wanted it or could pay for it. Funny enough, this was what I had offered at first, but Heather's lawyer had disregarded it after 2 months with no movement. The mediator gave up since we both held to our sides. Neither of us was there when our case went to the judge. It seemed simple, but it was not. After looking at the case, the female judge expressed issues about the plans we provided. She stated that shared custody would involve moving the kids between homes every week, causing instability. She pointed out that we hadn't actually tried counseling and that the financial plans were not fair for me. Frustrated with the continual conflicts amongst our lawyers, she conveyed her stance clearly. Let's establish a strategy for the youngsters first. I want both of them to have psychological examinations. They are likely affected by this situation. The house will not be sold, and Mrs. Moore and the kids will stay there until further notice. In addition, I have scheduled 12 sessions of couples counseling. I'll need to provide weekly updates, and we'll review this again before making any final decisions. Divorce is not to be taken lightly, especially when children are involved, as the ramifications can last a long time. What if our clients do not want to see a counselor? A lawyer inquired. Let me clarify, the judge stated, relaxing her expression for the first time in the meeting. This isn't simply an option. It's a rule you have to observe. If they still don't agree or refuse, explain to them what it means to be in trouble for breaking the rules, she added. I'm not sure how Heather felt, but I wasn't happy with the way things turned out. I wanted to move on with my life, but I needed to stay linked to her for 12 counseling sessions. It didn't seem fair, but that had been the way of life for quite some time. I attempted to save money by renting a modest room nearby with a tiny bathroom that was barely a half-mile from where I worked. I brought my lunch and walked to work whenever I could. Meanwhile, I needed to pay half of the bills. I had no choice but to follow the judge's directions and pay the majority of the house payment while keeping Heather on my health insurance. It looked like I'd be staying in my small room for a while. The court provided us with a list of 5 counselors to choose from. Heather chose a female counselor, whereas I chose a man. Finally, we settled on a husband and wife combination with exclusively nighttime appointments. My Tuesday and Thursday nights appeared to be booked for the foreseeable future. I hadn't seen or talked to Heather in nearly 2.5 months. I continued to see our children, Amy and Robert, twice a week, but they rushed out to greet me as soon as I pulled into the driveway. I never noticed Heather glancing out the window. Now I sat in the waiting area, waiting for Heather and our 6 o'clock appointment. The first thing I noticed was that her hair was suddenly dark brown and really short. Heather appeared to have dropped some weight, possibly more than the 10 pounds I had shed during the prior few months. She didn't smile and seemed as annoyed as I was to be there. Heather. "Steve," she said, sitting in a chair across the room from me, and David Taylor appeared to be in his late 60s. The conference space was small and contained only 4 chairs arranged in a circle. We would be near to each other regardless of where we sat. "Mr. and Mrs. Moore, I realize you have to be here because of the court, but you might be surprised at how many couples we've assisted over the years, and I'm trying to start on a positive note because we have to send weekly reports to the court. We expect both of you to follow our instructions and finish the homework." David warned us. "Homework?" I expressed amazement. "Yes, mister. More homework. Now, shall we begin?" Heather and I merely glanced at each other. "We reviewed your file, but we're not sure what caused all of this. One of you should start and explain how it all began." David looked at us, waiting for someone to speak up. "Sure, Steve. You can tell them how you ended a 10-year marriage simply because I injured your pride," Heather replied sarcastically. "Or you could explain how you discussed our personal lives with our pals, or perhaps describe your relationship with Brian. Steve, concentrate on yourself instead. Heather, why don't you do this? Oh, wait. You've been doing that since the minute I met you and spoke out. This back and forth is not helping us. I want you both to tell us your side of the tale. Steve, you start." Heather stared at me. I explained what transpired that Saturday afternoon, including Heather's comments and how things altered over the next few months. "So you were offended that your wife shared personal details about your marriage?" "Yes, especially considering I had no idea she was sad." "Steve, how many times do I need to tell you that everything was perfect between us?" Heather raised her voice slightly. "Mrs. Moore, you will get your turn. Please allow your hubby to talk." I expressed my frustration. If I wasn't meeting her requirements, why didn't she inform me? The most difficult aspect was when she said if we weren't close, she'd remember her time with Brian, which would rekindle old sentiments. As I talked, I stared directly at her. "And who is Brian?" and asked an old boyfriend. Heather said, "When did all of this happen? He was my boyfriend when I first met Steve, and he kept taking notes while David gazed between us." "I guess you didn't think much of Brian." David asked me. "He treated her poorly. Perhaps she would have been better off with him. I would not have spent 10 years with someone who could not be honest with me." Heather must have taken a tremendous knock. "So she chose you over Brian?" "Yes and no. She chose me physically, but emotionally, it appears she has never moved on, according to what I've heard." Heather's emotional loyalty was divided, and she said, "I guess that's one way to describe it." I replied and continued writing. "Heather, it's your turn to express your opinion, so what's the point? I've talked and talked, but Steve doesn't believe me. Simply tell your side of the story." Heather began speaking while glancing at Steve. Steve heard what I said after he entered the kitchen, but not before. He didn't hear me tell the other wives how much fun we had on our anniversary and how grateful I am every night for marrying him rather than someone else. They claimed I was in love and could not see well. I told them that while Steve is terrific, he is not perfect. That quote when the other wives began chatting about their husbands, too. Everyone tried to make each other laugh by telling hilarious anecdotes about their guys. I got caught up in it, and without thinking, I began making jokes about what they said. When I spotted Steve in the doorway, I assumed he had just arrived and had missed our enjoyable conversation, but he had actually heard practically everything. The rest is simply history. Heather, did any of the other spouses try to assure Steve it was just a pleasant chat? She inquired, glancing at Steve. They tried, but he didn't listen to anyone. When I attempted to explain the toys he discovered and how I occasionally let my imagination run wild, he was not satisfied. Everything went downhill from there. "I understand," David responded, turning to Steve. "Steve, do you ever think of other women? Is there anything you haven't told your wife, such as having a nice time with her and another lady, or seeing her with another man? Is that anything you want? Are you joking? What kind of man would desire his wife with someone else? That's not okay. So, how often do you make time for yourself? A few times per week. In addition to your wife, who else comes to mind?" I was stuck on that one. Which guy doesn't? It's simply a method to unwind. I never intended to act on such sentiments. I adore my wife, perhaps several times per week. But I don't want to say what I'm thinking. So it's fine for you to think about topics that don't involve your wife. I did not name my right hand. Right, you still do it. David pointed it out, first to me and then to Heather. I'm wondering if the main issue is Steve's awkwardness around your friends, rather than what Heather thinks in private. We can discuss this further next time. Our time is up for today. Thank goodness. I decided I wanted to go on following Tuesday. I want you each to write a letter to each other, explain why or why not. Do you think that divorce is a good idea? We'll meet here next Tuesday at 6 o'clock. I believe we made some progress today. I virtually sped out of that office in my automobile. My heart eventually started to settle down. For the last 15 minutes, I felt as if everyone was watching me. I did not start this disaster. If Heather had simply stated what she meant, we wouldn't be in this scenario. Now. It took me days to process my thoughts. As I gazed around my small room, frustration struck me again. I wanted to return to my home and my 2 children. I just wanted to be the wonderful father I used to be. So I began working on my assignment. I took 3 days to get it properly on the first day. On the second day, I wrote anything and everything that came to mind. I removed a lot of what I wrote, and on the third, I pared it down even more, leaving only what I needed to make my point on Sunday. I picked up Amy and Robert and spent some quality time with them. I didn't have anything at home, so we went to the movies and the best pizza shop in town. When I dropped them off, I observed Heather peering out the window and was relieved she did not come outside to say hello. Tuesday loomed ahead, and I was not looking forward to it. We were meant to meet twice a week, but David and Anne suggested that we start after the 3rd week to address the major issues first. Who wants to start? And inquired, gazing at both of us. Heather took out a piece of paper and remarked, I think we should just get this started. I believe Steve and I should proceed with our divorce because he no longer trusts or loves me. She folded the paper and placed it back in her pocket. Heather, it was very direct. Would you like to explain further? And asked. Not really. Steve doesn't believe anything I say, and that's not my concern anymore. It's a loss for him, and he is only harming himself and our children. How is this so? David asked. Amy and Robert miss him. They quote, I'll find a way to manage, but I hope they understand how much his decisions affect them. I hope they feel better as time goes by. She turned to face me. Your turn. Well, that was difficult to follow, I replied by bringing out my letter. Can I get it read? They exchanged glances before Heather took it from my hands. I quote, read it because it's intended for me anyway. Dear Heather, I knew I wanted to be with you from the moment we met. You looked at me and smiled. He explained all I needed to know. Brian did not deserve you, and I thought if I worked hard enough, you'd select me. I fought very hard to earn your heart. And I honestly believed I had it. I genuinely loved you, and your love inspired me to do things I never believed I could. When you handed me Amy, then Robert, I felt like the world's luckiest man. Life was not ideal, but I thought our marriage was good. Some people spend their entire lives searching for the right person. I was lucky to find my immediately away. Heather paused and glanced at me. After a minute, she returned to the letter and resumed reading. I thought we could discuss anything. I was mistaken. I had no idea you felt this way about me. I would have willingly given up a lot to change what happened in the kitchen that day. Your comments wounded my heart and made me feel empty. I had been okay just minutes before. It would have been easy if you had cheated on me. Then I might detest you for a legitimate reason. But you did not do anything like that. And there is the problem. If I had known, we might have worked things out together, but you never told me how you truly felt. I stupidly assumed I was your soulmate. Maybe I was in the beginning, but not now. I simply want my children and my previous life back. I believe that one day I will feel complete again, but for the time being, I rely on the affection of my children to get by. I do not detest you. I feel bad for you. One day you'll discover you've missed out on the best thing that has occurred to you. I did not sign it. Heather had tears in her eyes, and Anne was also teary. Steve, you never stated that you wanted the divorce to happen. David replied, taking my letter from Heather. Does it really matter now? Steve, everything counts in life. Yes, I used to think that way. Not anymore, I said. No matter how hard we tried, we couldn't fix the problem. Heather stared at me, but she said nothing. On Thursday, I want to discuss what is best for Robert and Amy. The psychologist will meet with them tomorrow. Maybe we can figure out how this is hurting them. Remember that I need your thoughts written down. Heather, please think about it more this week. After that, everyone left. Heather appeared to want to say something, but happily she didn't quote T. She still appeared irritated. I despised the appearance. Why should she be angry? I was the one experiencing pain. I'll see you. Thursday was all I said before the elevator door closed. I thought I had excellent grounds for the children to reside with me. Heather thought her explanations were just as valid. We both felt we were the better parents. But I had something she didn't. I intended to move into my parents' house. They had 3 unoccupied rooms, one for each of us. The children would have their own place, and when I wasn't around, they would be supervised by a full-time adult. I was disappointed that David and Anne did not appear to care about either of our considerations for where the children should live. They had different opinions about what we should discuss instead of focusing on the children. They kept asking me questions about Heather and our relationship. I answered each question honestly. David and Anne encouraged us to express our feelings, which we did, but we only got so far. Steve, you keep claiming that Heather lies a lot. Can you offer me an example other than what you've previously mentioned? I cannot think of anything specific. However, if she lied about that, she most likely lied about other things too. You're really bothering me, you know? Heather said. I've never lied to you. Maybe I did not tell you everything, she admitted. Okay, tell me one of your half-truths, I said, crossing my arms. All right. Did I ever tell you no while I was feeling good? No, I never have. Even when I wasn't in the mood, I knew I could still enjoy the situation. I've always needed a lot of affection to feel connected to you. Sometimes we simply didn't have the time, so I made certain you were happy, rather than worrying about myself. I hoped that the next time we were together would be better. And it always has been. So you were acting, I asked? Yes, have you never noticed? How many times has this happened? Half the time, 3/4 of the time. How often, Heather? You still do not understand, do you? I didn't do it because I wasn't concerned. I did it because I cared so much. Most people would have rejected you or made excuses. I tried to make you happy whenever possible. I was not being dishonest. We just had some quiet moments together. Did I experience excitement every time? No, but I was content knowing we loved each other. That's what really mattered. Honestly, you made me happy. The majority of the time, you made me feel unique. I can't believe how much you mistrust yourself. That one comment I made had such an impact on you. She was correct, and I hoped she wasn't, and we finished our session shortly after. I know we didn't talk much about the kids aside from where you both think they should live. We need to focus on the 2 of you for a little longer before we talk about the kids next week. I want you to record what went wrong in your marriage, not just about your personal issues. I also want you to share where you see your life in 6 months, a year, and 3 to 5 years from now. Be as detailed as possible, covering every aspect of your life. And handed us both tape recorders. How could I know what was going to happen to me? I could say whatever I wanted, but my guesses had not been very accurate lately. Neither had my decisions. I only wanted to go back to that Saturday. I kept telling myself it wouldn't happen no matter how much I wanted it to. I spent hours talking into the recorder. I recorded, then recorded again, and finally edited what I had. My marriage was fine until something went wrong. Work was progressing well. I was up for a promotion next year when the assistant manager retired. My boss told me I was in a good position for it. All I had to do was continue working hard and it would be mine. Until that horrible day, I had everything. On Tuesday morning, I was still working on my homework but didn't feel confident in myself. I had no answers to most of my life's questions, and will be a little late today, but she asked us to begin without her. David said as Heather and I walked in almost simultaneously. I had just returned from work in my business casual attire. Heather looked nice and seemed prepared for a night out. She looked amazing, but she avoided looking at me. She seemed to be planning something fun. Following our meeting tonight, I usually ask, who wants to go first? But tonight, I want you both to swap tapes. Enter the other 2 rooms and listen to each other's recordings. Then come back and talk about what you heard. Our eyes met and we nervously handed each other our tapes. I sat at a simple wooden desk, pressed play, and heard things I didn't expect. Heather was leaving after our divorce became final. She planned to quit her job and live with a friend who ran a bed and breakfast in St. Augustine. She had already looked into schools for the kids and wanted to invest in the bed and breakfast with money from the sale of our house. She dreamed of starting her own business and said she wanted to find someone special in the next 5 years because she loved having someone who cared for her. She was moving forward. She would be disappointed when she heard my tape. Besides being excited for my promotion, I had no plans for the next year, much less for 5 years. I hadn't even thought about the money from the house. I just said I would do my best to help my kids deal with the divorce. It seemed I wouldn't be living my life through them. We did agree on one thing. We both thought our earlier life seemed like a fairy tale. Heather said she was happy. I knew I was too. What was wrong with this picture? Especially with me. My life was falling apart and I hated it. I walked out of the room and joined the group in the main area. I threw the recorder on the table and looked at all 3 of them. I'm done. Tell the judge I give up. I have nothing left. I can't eat, sleep, and at work I feel worthless. Heather, you took my friends, my home, and now you want to take my kids too. I live in a small apartment and walk to work to save money so I can help pay for 2 homes. Is that fair? No, but I can't change it. You had a choice. You could have stayed, but you decided to leave. No one forced you. Heather said, standing firm. Why didn't you let me know? You're not a shy girl. Why didn't you tell me how you felt? I asked. Don't make it seem like I was someone you were waiting for. You would have reacted badly. I couldn't tell you. I felt ignored. Brian didn't take it well. That last weekend together, I told him that even though he was nice, he was too focused on himself and didn't make me feel fulfilled. Her words shocked me, making me sit back in my chair. He said I was distant and thought something was wrong with me because I never complained before. Well, I told him I was unhappy. That was the weekend we broke up, when I saw him a few months later after you and I were together. He still thought highly of himself and teased me about you. I told him you paid more attention to me, and even if you weren't as experienced, you knew how to connect with me. I listened intently to a conversation I had never known about, but should have. She told Brian I was better in ways that counted. Close your mouth, Steve, or you'll catch flies. But I wasn't saying Brian was a horrible partner. He could be interesting and intense, but he wasn't you, Steve. Brian approached proximity like a sport, always aiming for a win. You, however, saw it as something we shared, and that made it unique. I enjoy enjoyable moments too, but for me, the way we connect is what matters most. But you claimed Brian was superior. I reminded her. Brian was eager to please and could go on for a long time, but the daily connection was too much for me. I wasn't lying when I said I required a lot of attention, and with 2 kids, there wasn't always time for it. It was my problem, not yours. If you ask any woman if she is always satisfied, you will discover that the majority of them are not, I quote, a normal woman who cares profoundly about you. And I am deeply sorry for what you heard. At least you handled it better than Brian did. He became enraged, but I simply felt hurt. It was not a good weekend. Why haven't you told me? I am mortified by what happened. I did not tell anyone, but I've told you numerous times that I adore you. You, not him. What else is there to say? You spoke the words, but they were only words. Everyone in the room turned to face me. Steve, what you're saying doesn't make sense, she remarked, rapidly writing while looking at her husband, David. After overhearing what I did, I stopped listening to her. I feel as if I've been taken by surprise. What she claimed might have been accurate, but I didn't hear anything else. We were both talking, but none of us was truly listening to the other. As I already stated, we were simply exchanging words. So, this was an intriguing meeting. Let's think about what we discussed tonight and continue on Thursday. I nodded, feeling really exhausted. I wanted to speak with Heather more, but it appeared she had other plans for the evening, and David let us out. Now Heather and I were alone in the hallway. Heather, allow me to walk you to your car, I murmured, guiding her down the hall. You're familiar with the saying. The quiet was really loud. I apologize, I began as we approached her car. I had no idea how you could do it. I've never told you. I was too humiliated to admit Brian had wounded me. I did not want to upset your sentiments about our relationship. And see how it turned out. There was something deep in our eyes that united us. Have you got time for a coffee? I did not want our time to end. I have plans, she replied shyly. That is okay. I suppose I'll see you on Thursday. Have a good night. I replied with a smile, even though I was uneasy inside. Have a lovely night. Why did I say that? I didn't want her to go and have fun. I wanted her with me, but I squandered my chance. As I drove home, I told myself off. That was our difficulty. We forgot how to communicate with each other. We said words and occasionally got them right, but not when it counted the most. You might assume Heather came to my house later and we spent the night together. That only occurs in movies or stories. This was real life, and we'd made a mess of the previous 6 months. I did text her before bedtime to tell her I loved her. I never received a reply. She was probably doing something else. For the first time in a long while. I arrived at work feeling energized. I accomplished more on Wednesday than I have in weeks. On my way out, my supervisor even commented it was wonderful to see the old Steve again. He hadn't returned totally, but he wasn't gone either. Wednesday night was my night with Amy and Robert, so I headed directly to their house after work. They dashed outside and jumped into the car, chatting eagerly. I hoped to see Heather. I assumed I was still on her thoughts. We had a great night. We went to play laser tag and had a wonderful time. We didn't win, but it wasn't important. We were all together. We headed to Chili's for dinner. I was bored of pizza. By 8 o'clock, we were pulling into the driveway. Heather must have noticed us because she opened the front door right when the kids ran up to hug me. They were so warm and delighted before running inside. Heather waved once before closing the door. I could feel I was still on the outside, looking in. I have no one else to blame but myself. Heather skipped our meeting on Thursday. When she did not arrive, I decided to leave too, and David, who were ready to discuss last Tuesday's session. However, without Heather, there was nothing to discuss. It appeared that she had already stated her needs and was moving on. I couldn't help but wonder who this new man in her life was. After our Tuesday meeting, I had planned to tell Heather how much I wanted to try again as a couple, but it appeared that she was thinking about someone else. I had informed everyone a week before that I was finished. Saturday was tough for me. I drank too much and missed spending Sunday with the kids. I awoke around 3 p.m. and called to inform them that I was sick. I promised to make up to them on Wednesday. I did not even call to cancel Tuesday's session. Whether it was a court order or not, I was not going. She had her own plans and was moving on, so I needed to let go of my concerns and focus on my own future. It was time for me to pursue my own happiness. Steve, you missed yesterday's session. David called me at work on Wednesday morning. We waited for you for a while. Then we began without you, so Heather showed up. I am surprised. She mentioned that something came up unexpectedly. Something, or someone, I asked. David, I like you and Anne, but it appears that Heather knows what she wants, which does not include me. I wish her the best. Steve, I need to take care of myself now. These sessions are court-ordered. You could get in trouble. Did you mention it to Heather when she missed? It was quiet on the phone. I thought so. She always has her way. Gets arrested and the man gets the short end of the stick. Steve, after that last meeting, I thought the same thing. But it appears we are the only ones. We had a good run, but it's over, and I need to move on, just like she did. I thanked him, heeded his warning, and retired for the night. I think I underestimated David's determination. I left work at 5 o'clock. A police officer was standing near my car. Mr. Stephen Moore, he asked. I nodded. As far as I can tell, we have two choices. You can attend your counseling session, or I can take you to the judge, where you can explain why you did not follow her orders. And Mr. Moore, I would not recommend the second option. It appeared that I didn't have much choice at all. Can I trust you to go, or do I need to accompany you? Okay, I'll go, but I want to make it clear that I'm going against my will. He did not appear to care. I'm glad you could join us this evening, David said as I walked into the office. Heather and Anne were already present. I didn't have many options, did I said, but you did. He responded seriously. Should we start for the next 20 minutes? We spoke a lot. Heather was upset that I wasn't joining in. David asked me to share my thoughts on something Heather said last week and appeared to be taking careful notes. Heather, where did you go after we met last Tuesday night? I inquired suddenly. I'm just going out to dinner, she said. Who are they with? I pressed, staring straight at her. Just someone from work. She would not look at me. Should we continue asking questions, or will you tell us more? Okay, it was a guy from work, but it was only a friendly date. Did you feel close to him? Heather looked to David for assistance. Steve, I do not believe this is helpful. Let's concentrate on what's important. Heather, did you connect with him? Yes or no? No, but I did want to. I have not been close to anyone in 6 months, and I miss it. Is that what you're curious about? Steve, how many people have you been with? 2, 3, 20. Sorry to disappoint you, Heather, but there are none. Things were becoming tense again, as if I believed it. She responded sharply. You are aware of how difficult you can be, and I was considering trying again. Anyway, I hope he had a great time on Thursday night. I stood up. Tell your friend that I'll take my chances with the judge next Tuesday. And? David attempted to speak, but I stopped listening. I have had enough, I told myself as I walked down the corridor. I was tired of being angry and being around people who made me feel that way. I needed a change. I got in my car, shut the door firmly, started it, and almost drove right past Heather, who was standing in front of it. Heather, please move, I yelled, inching forward. She didn't move. For once, you're going to hear me out and then you can go, I said, turning off the car. Say what you need to say so I can leave. I was losing my patience. The reason I wasn't here last Thursday is that I told Adam I couldn't see him anymore, And why is that? Because you're leaving soon for St. Augustine. Or maybe he wasn't right for you, she asked. I said I didn't share anything with him. I told him I was still in love with my husband and wanted him back. It seems silly now that I think about it. So now that I've said what I came here to say, can you leave? I'm done with this too. Have you ever heard of a Mexican standoff? That's what we had right then. Me and my car and Heather standing in front of it with her arms crossed. Well, you had a lot to say 10 minutes ago, she said sternly. Look, I don't know what you want anymore. You've got everything all out in your life, and I am not quitting my career to join you on this new road. I have worked hard for this position, and I deserve to have something good happen for once. Steve, I'm not going anywhere and told me to say things that would provoke a reaction from you. You are stuck in a low spot right now, and she thought this could wake you up a bit. It works. Can't you see that you still have a wife who loves you and 2 kids who wish you were with them? I'm not flawless, and neither are you. But I've kept my feelings within for too long. You held back for my feelings. My rage began to grow again. Yes, I did it to save your pride. Now I was annoyed. Don't put it all on me. If you had contacted me sooner, perhaps we could have avoided all of this .okay, I confess I was incorrect. It is my fault. Are you happy right now? I grinned for the first time in years. That wasn't so hard, was it? She did not grin, but I noticed her lips quiver slightly. You aren't flawless either, she shot back. I knew I wouldn't say it aloud. She told me that I had 2 choices tonight. We can go back upstairs and chat seriously. Alternatively, you can leave and we will finish this right now. It's your decision. Despite the fact that things were stressful, I admired her honesty. The next month was difficult. We had a lot of fights, which brought out old resentments. I honestly did not think we would make it. Especially after I told Heather she needed to explain to our friends that I wasn't falling short in some aspects. They already know. At least the wives do. I'd like you to inform my pals that I'm doing my best for you. She considered for a moment. Think of it as the result of saying things at the wrong moment. She consented, but not happy. It didn't help that the guys gave me high fives and said they knew I was doing well. Look, I didn't say he was wonderful. I just said he was acceptable, Heather replied, smiling with the other women. She was generally the last one to speak. Our possessions in our lives, returning to their former state. Not really. Amy and Robert are quite happy. I'm back at home and we're still doing a lot of the same activities we used to do, namely playing laser tag. However, our relationship in other areas has evolved. If Heather isn't interested, she makes it apparent. She also expresses her willingness to explore new things. One thing was clear. I wanted her to change her friends. I told her that if she wanted something, we could decide it jointly without going into detail. It took nearly 2 weeks, but I eventually found Brian. Looking at him, I could tell that his work had taken its toll on him. His long hair was now cropped short under a baseball cap, and he had a scruffy beard that appeared to have not been trimmed in a while. He didn't look nice anymore. He was still huge, but not particularly appealing. He had no idea who I was, and when I took out my phone to take a picture, he did not like it. Who are you, and what do you want? He inquired, plainly not wishing to speak to a stranger. Brian, remember Heather Clark? I replied, smiling. Well, she is now my wife, and we have 2 gorgeous children. I added some sarcasm to my words. You lost, and I won. I did not lose anything. Heather wasn't that wonderful. I have lots of others who fared considerably better. Has she ever gotten better? He laughed, gazing at his pals who were listening, which infuriated me. I acted rashly when I was angry. Brian was bigger, stronger, and had more experience. I hit him hard in the face, possibly injuring my palm against his forehead. I got a couple more hits in before his pals dragged him away and warned him not to damage me. Tell her that if she gets tired of you, she can phone me for some serious lessons, he remarked with a giggle as I walked back to my car. I was hurt, but I refused to back down. My hand was not damaged, just somewhat uncomfortable. I had a chipped tooth, a broken rib, 2 more cracked ribs, and possibly 2 puffy eyes. At the very least, I had preserved the most crucial portions safe. You are such a fool, Heather reprimanded me repeatedly while trying to clean me up. Our children stared in shock, wondering what had happened to their father. He could have seriously hurt you. What were your thoughts? Getting in a battle with Brian, of all people? Nobody disrespects my wife and gets away with it. Heather paused, looked at me, and smiled slightly. That was a long time ago, but I never realized. She became silent, and in that moment we formed a new bond. I told Robert and Amy to go prepare for bed. Now that that's out of the way, we need to chat more. If we want to better understand each other, we must work together. I never heard Brian's name again after that. He was mistaken about many things. Heather and I had a special connection, and I valued our time together. Well, no one is perfect. Here's the next story. My 15-year-old bride and the mother of my 2 children shattered our marriage. Now I thank my lucky stars that I have found a woman who loves me. Published by Slurp-Off. You know when something doesn't go the way kids expect. They want a do-over. The football does not travel far enough. The dice only yielded a 5 instead of a 1-2 where you strike out in baseball. A child sees all of them as do-overs. So it takes me to the question that has been on my mind for the past 20 minutes. If you could go back in time and change any aspect of your life, would you? Use what you know now to remedy all of your previous mistakes. Like studying harder in school, pursuing a different job path, or not letting Lisa Thomas slip through your fingers after seeing how she looked after losing 60 pounds. Or consider choosing someone else to spend the rest of your life with, such as a wife. You see, just 20 minutes ago, my wife and I reached a crossroads in our marriage. At this point, I'm not sure how it will come out. So that is why I am asking myself that specific question, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Maybe some background information will help explain why I'm asking myself this question right now. My name is Keith, and I am currently married to someone. We've been together 15 years and have 2 children. David, 15, and Candy, who turned 10 on Saturday, met at a fraternity kegger during my senior year of college. I'd gone stag, and Anne was with her long-term lover. He was becoming a little too friendly around the bonfire and told him to stop. I believe he didn't want to take no for an answer and became really rude, grabbing her by her long blonde locks. I sat back and watched till he went to kick her. I grabbed his arm and yelled something like, "A real man does not hit a woman." He then swung at me. The foolish shit. In less than a minute, it was all over him on the ground, and I was walking him out to my car. From that day forward, she referred to me as her knight in shining armor, a description I strive to live up to. We don't want to bore you with our fairy tale romance. Let's just say we fell in love and became pregnant. And we got married. Not what you expected, right? I was madly in love with Anne, and I knew she loved me. But I wasn't sure how much. She was the girl everyone desired to have. And me? Well, I wasn't a dark, but I was also not in her league. So this is how we began our amazing life together. I had just graduated from college and landed a terrific entry-level work at a large accounting company, whereas she had to drop out shortly before her final year to give birth to David. I, quote, am sorry to hear that she never got the opportunity to return and finish her degree. The first 2 years were challenging, what to do with a little baby and little money, but we got by in year 3. My parents gave us the money for a down payment, and we purchased a charming 2-bedroom home. After that, we never looked back. Update. Years 4 through 12 were physically healthy, but we began to drift apart. By year 14, our marriage had been marked with a CR asterisk, and this year, let's just say I was ready to bury it. How did things get so out of hand? A good question. We took care of everyone's needs but our own. We ensured that the children attended football practices and dancing recitals, and that they were always nourished and dressed in the latest styles. But we stopped chatting. I'd received 2 promotions and reduced my travel when I returned to work so we could still have dinner together, but it, too, fell by the wayside. The kids got active, and after 5 years with her employer, she acquired an outside sales job, which required her to be gone 2 to 3 nights each week. 2 years ago, I asked my parents to take the kids so we could have a weekend to ourselves. I arranged everything down to the last romantic detail. You can't believe how much I was looking forward to it at the last minute, but I had an emergency and had to fly away Friday morning, returning late Sunday. Don, waste that weekend. We planned to do it another weekend and told me, but we never did. Our so-called love life was all but over. We used to do it 3 to 4 times a week, but it was reduced to once or twice per week until it was almost non-existent. Finally, it came to a head last Friday night when David and my father left for a fishing trip and Candy was at a sleepover. Tonight is the night. I assumed that I had planned the entire evening and that by the time I arrived home, the steaks were on the grill and the wine was open. As soon as she walked through the door, I knew I was doomed. Damn contract revisions. I need to finish them by Monday, she yelled as she threw her briefcase down on the desk. You want to go out for a bite? She asked. I gave her a glass of wine and mentioned that there were steaks on the barbecue. Potatoes are in the oven and a salad awaits her. I'm not very hungry, but I suppose I should eat something before I go to work, she announced. Couldn't that wait until tomorrow? I asked. Greg wants my adjustments by tomorrow night so that we may prepare a fresh proposal and deliver it to our customer on Monday morning. I felt as if I were eating with a stranger. We only spoke 2 words, and after she finished and said she'd see me in a few hours, I read the newspaper, watched a few TV shows, and by 10:30 p.m. I went searching for her. She was in the den on the phone with her boss, Greg, and simply waved at me. Are you almost done? I asked. I'll see you upstairs in about an hour, he said. I walked out, cynically saying, don't hurry on my account. Around 12 o'clock, I finally got upstairs. I pretended to sleep because I didn't want to talk to her just now. I was way too angry. I heard her enter the bathroom and felt her settle into bed. There was no spooning. This ended roughly 2 years ago. As she fell asleep Saturday morning, I woke up early, went to the gym, and kicked the shit out of the majority of the machines. After working out 9 miles on the treadmill, I started walking to cool off. As I was nearing the end of my time on the machine, the lady next to me spoke up. I can't believe you ran so far. I have a hard time doing 2 miles, she added, laughing. Are you doing this every day? She asked. Recently, I've been doing it about 4 times per week. I informed her that it relieves all of the stress that had built up. You must be extremely stressed, she told me. I have other ways to relieve mine. That does not entail attempting to kill my body. She chuckled as she introduced herself. My name is Linda, and I joined only last month. Hi, my name is Keith. I spoke as I shook her hand. I started here around 3 years ago after noticing my spare tire. I said this while patting my stomach. It took me over a year to get back into shape, but it was worth it. We exchanged a few more words and agreed to see one other next week, if I did not know better. I could swear she was hitting on me, Keith said to himself as he changed out of his damp clothing. We waved to one another as we walked out into the parking lot, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper. When I entered the kitchen, no hello or welcome home kiss, just a quick look up from her page to recognize my presence. Is there any coffee left? I asked. Sure. Help yourself, was all she said. Did you finish your report last night? I asked. Not exactly. She said that it should be done by this afternoon. Why? She asked. I just needed to know if I would be on my own tonight, I asked. I didn't expect this and snapped back at myself. It is my work. It's always something, right? And you're gone 2 or 3 nights a week, and when you get home, you either have work with you or your mind is elsewhere, I said disgustedly. I will find something to do tonight. Do not worry about me, I told her as I went upstairs. She began to speak, but did not duck him. This is my job. Let him sulk in thought to herself as she returned to her papers and was speaking with Greg about the rest of the figures when she noticed Keith walk out the door. Where the hell is he going, she wondered. Probably going to the grocery or something. She reflected before returning to her task. When Keith did not return, she dialed his cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Where the hell was he? She was furious. At around 12 p.m. I was having a great time at the local drinking hole, playing pool, darts, and dancing with the girls. I drank my beer and went out. Anne will be pie quing when I come home. I told myself, duck her. She has put me on the back burner for the last time. I pondered as I turned into the driveway. Where the hell have you been? And began to target me at Tony's. Why? I responded. You could have at least told me where you were headed, she exclaimed, seething at me. What would be the purpose for doing that? So I knew where you were. God damn it, maybe I'd wanted to join you. Did you ever thought about it? She yelled. Let's get serious. There was no way you were going to join me. You had a beautiful report to complete for Greg, so let us not reassure each other. So, if we are done, I am going upstairs to bed. I said this as I turned away from her and walked up the stairs. Don't expect any lovemaking tonight, she yelled back at me, and there has been no lovemaking in this house in the last 2 years, I murmured as I turned to face her. Even the love we've shared has been pi*. Jasper is, at best, undone and no longer asking for your affection. I used to assume that even a mercy duck was preferable than no love at all. Now I am not so sure. So from now on, you can do anything, and with whoever you choose, because I no longer care. With that, I moved into the guest room, locked the door, and went to sleep, then knocked on the door and asked to speak. But I was much too pie-pappy, Ducker remarked. I've been trying to chat for months, and all I've gotten is should she kiss my ass. Now add an asterisk. And I had never seen Keith so enraged. He, only a bit inebriated. She thought he'd be okay in the morning. But he wasn't. I had rolled out of bed and was already at the gym. On a Sunday morning, the gym was nearly unoccupied, so I could choose whatever machine to use. I was ready to return to the sauna when I noticed a familiar figure on the treadmill. Morning, Linda. Why do you go to the gym on a Sunday morning? I asked. Hey, Keith. I couldn't sleep, so instead of lying in bed, I decided to get up and exercise. Want to join me? We walked on the treadmill and talked for an hour. You want to go out for a bite? She finally asked, and without thinking, I consented. Let me take a quick shower, then I'll meet you in the lobby in about 15 minutes, I replied with a smile. Linda walked towards the women's locker rooms and said, See you then. Dennis was always busy on Sunday mornings, but we got a small booth in the corner. Linda could tell something was on my mind when I kept twisting my wedding band while trying to make light talk at home and eventually asked. I didn't want to say anything, but once I started talking, everything spilled out. Linda listened calmly without saying anything until I finished. She could see I was physically and emotionally exhausted as I sat there staring at my unfinished breakfast. My husband died in a vehicle accident 2 years ago. We were having a tough time, and he took out in a huff, ran a red light, and got hit every day. I wondered whether we had chatted more, kissed more, and made love more. Maybe we could have worked something out, but we never had the chance. Try to reach a compromise with your wife. And what if you can't? She said, Life is too short to be unhappy. I'd best get Maya's asterisk in gear, or I'm going to wonder where the hell I am. I told her how much I appreciated chatting to you, Linda. You have calming effects on me, I replied with a smile. See you at the gym tomorrow, I asked. She said, I would not miss it for the world. When we walked out to our automobiles, she hugged me. Things will improve in one way or another, she informed me as she got in her car. She correct. Life is too short to be unhappy all of the time. I told myself as I drove home. It was 10 a.m. and Anne was pie, said. As with last night, there was no note or call, and she didn't know where her spouse was. When he walked through the door, She hit him with both barrels. "Where were you?" she yelled. "Good morning, hun. How do you feel?" "Did you get good sleep?" I asked. "Cut the trash up? Where were you all morning?" "You were asleep, so I went to the gym before heading out for breakfast. That is all." I told her, though. I did, however, purposefully leave out. "I was with another woman. Don't use the pi asterisk dot sing her off even more. It's simply after last night and everything. I just needed to know where you were." "That's it," she said. "Did you think I was so upset that I would go out and hurt myself?" I replied sarcastically. "Do not flatter yourself, dude." I assured her that I meant what I said last night. "And now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go pick up our children, Dot." "Maybe we can have a family supper after you finish your lovely report," I said, dropping my exercise bag and walking out to the garage. I grilled hot dogs and hamburgers and purchased noodle and potato salads at the grocery. Thank goodness the kids were chatting a mile a minute, or it would have been a quiet supper, Dot. Everyone helped with the dishes so we could all watch a movie before bedtime. After that, I struggled with the kids for a while, telling them it was bedtime and they needed to get their buttocks in gear. After a quick kiss for each of them, I was alone with Anne again. "Do you want to chat, or will you sulk again?" And started. She just didn't understand it. It was as if everything was my fault and her poop didn't stink. And I chose an inside job a year ago to avoid having to fly out of town and instead spend nights and weekends with my family. You, on the other hand, travel to God knows where every week, so we no longer have time for each other, Dot. I quote, "am scared that if we don't act quickly, they'll lose interest in us and fight like any other exes. Who gets the kids, the dog, and the home? I've worked too hard to get where I am now. I am not like you. I did not have the opportunity to graduate from college. I had David instead. So now you want me to return what I've gained?" "I do not think so." She said this while staring at me. "I suppose that solves my question," I said as I began climbing the stairs. "Where are you going?" We weren't finished chatting when they shouted up at me, but in my mind they were. It took less than 10 minutes to shift all of my belongings from their bedroom to the guest room. I had just washed my teeth and was washing up when I heard a beating on the door. "What do you think you are doing? You are acting like a spoiled child. Open this door," she yelled loudly. I opened the door. "What? So what do you want? Come back to bed with me. You are my hubby." "I love you, Dot," she said in a much softer voice. "Are you going to show me some sympathy, love? Perhaps a mercy duck tonight? If I did." "No thanks. I'd get more affection from someone off the street than you've shown me lately," I told her. "Fine." "Suit yourself," she responded in a huff. I walked into their bedroom and shut the door. So the last demise of our marriage began when she pushed herself into her profession and was gone for at least 3 to 4 nights per week and 1 weekend each month, Dot. We only chatted about the kids' schedules and who was doing what. The children and I were now on our own. We attended all of their activities without her, and despite our efforts to include her, she never showed up. I became more and more friendly with Linda and discovered she was a customer of ours. She, quote, forgotten to explain that she and her husband owned a lucrative firm, which is now gone. She was running it by herself. So wonders never cease. We found ourselves eating lunch at least twice every week. When the kids were busy, we'd have an evening dinner or two. After about 3 months, I had had enough. I hired an attorney and drafted separation documents. Maybe it was Linda's idea, and she needs a wake-up call to decide if her family and marriage are more important than her career. At the very least, you will grab her attention, she replied with a smirk. I had her serve on Tuesday morning at work, and everything went worse from there. I was prepared. I informed the switchboard not to relay any of her calls, turned off my cell phone, and waited until around 11 o'clock, according to our receptionist, There was an irate woman in the front lobby, claiming to be my wife, who refused to go until I dealt with her. I waited 5 more minutes before heading down to the lobby. "What the hell is this?" she yelled at me while holding a manila envelope. "I'm not sure, but I believe there's separation paperwork," I replied quietly. "If this is your concept of a joke, it is not amusing, and I am not laughing." She shouted in my face, "And now is not the time or place to discuss our personal issues. I'll be happy to speak with you when I get home tonight." "I told her I'd be waiting," she remarked as she rushed away. I smiled as I told the receptionist it was that time of month. I arrived home a little early, but Anne was already there, wine glass in hand. I could see it wasn't her first drink, and I knew this conversation was going to go wrong fast. What's this nonsense about separation? I do not want any goddamn separation. She yelled at me. I guess you're correct. I think we should just file for divorce and be done with it, I told her, shocked. And I figured a break would give us time to work it out, but you're probably correct. We'll probably get divorced anyhow. So why prolong the inevitable? I don't want a damn divorce, and shouted. You were the one who moved out of our bedroom, not me. True, Anne, but I grew tired of being regarded as your brother rather than your husband. So, what options did I have? Look inside. Our marriage is on life support, and I'm prepared to pull the plug, unless you can convince me that I shouldn't. Keith, I informed her that we are currently going through a hard patch. My work is driving me crazy, but it should calm down shortly. Honey, I love you and do not want to divorce. And this is how it will play out. I'm leaving for the next 30 days. This allows you to determine whether or not you want to pursue it further. If not, oh well, you are free to do anything you need to find out. If you wish to try to pick up the pieces of a previously successful marriage. We can chat, but I will not seek you out. I am tired of chasing you. Keith, this is ridiculous. We need to be united, if we stand a chance of making it. And we've been together, but it's not working. Are you not listening? I want my wife and best friend back. Not a chilly businesswoman, don't you understand? I will go pack and be out of your hair as quickly as possible. I told her that as I was packing, his kids entered the room. Are you and Mom getting divorced? They inquired. Probably children. Not that I want one. I just don't think your mother loves me anymore. No matter what happens, I will always be your father. I really love you two. Nothing will change that. I told them as soon as I noticed them, standing in the doorway. I hate Mom for doing this to our family. I want to go with you, David murmured, holding me. I agree. Candy said, I saw the tears in Anne's eyes as she sobbed running down the hall. Your mother cares deeply for you. She only needs time to sort out a few things. Please don't dislike her and be decent while I'm away. Okay. They agreed and helped me bring my stuff down to the car, but they were nowhere to be found. The following 3 weeks were both excellent and bad. Work was hectic and kept my thoughts occupied, which was a good thing. But being away from the kids was difficult. I made sure to see them at least twice a week, but it wasn't enough. It did, however, provide me the opportunity to get to know Linda much better. We ate dinner most nights and were essentially an informal pair. Update 2. The 4th week arrived and I was on edge. I spoke with him a few times, but we never talked about anything essential, only about the kids. I took Thursday afternoon off and asked Linda if she wanted to go shopping. I need to get the kids something and I'd like to see you again. I will clear my calendar, so please pick me up after 12:30 at my workplace. She suggested that we have an early dinner before you leave tonight. The or something was all I wanted from her. I thought to myself that I hadn't had love in almost 4 months, and my right hand was becoming calloused. We exchanged friendly pecks, kisses, and a few innocent hugs, but that was it. We selected a few items we felt the kids would enjoy and considered our next move. I was holding the door open for Linda when she abruptly turned around, grabbed me, and kissed me. The hell with them. I had fully recovered, but this time we did not duck. We made love. It was gradual yet lovely. You're thinking about your wife, right? Linda asked him. Until today. I've never been cheated on, and before. As we made love just now, I remembered how it was with Anne. Before work became her #1 focus, and now all I have are recollections of the past. And this makes me sad. It hasn't died yet. You both have another shot at it. Even after this afternoon, she informed me as she drew me to her. If things don't work out between the two of you, I'll take you in a heartbeat. She stated this while kissing me lightly. Now take a shower. You have 2 children waiting for you tonight. We bathed together, and despite my desire to play about, Linda resisted. We dressed, collected our belongings, and opened the door to the parking lot. Sometimes she simply happens. You are in the right place at the wrong time, and it slaps you right in the face. Linda and I stepped out of our room, and Greg, her employer, walked out of the room next to us. There was a pregnant pause while everyone's heart rate increased. Keith, and spoke as she covered her mouth. Hi, and hello, Greg. How is it hanging? I said this while glancing at them. I bet Sandy has no idea. Does my wife think you're avoiding her? Oh, I guess this explains why you stopped loving me. You were getting your fill from old Greg here. I spoke in my most caustic tone. Damn. I think your supervisors will be astonished by what you do on business time. Keith, it is not how you think or respond. Linda and I could hear you through the thick walls, for Christ's sake. What don't I understand? What the hell were you doing in the room with that slot? And why are you not at work? She doesn't have a slot, and I'm not going to discuss it with you right now. I quote M on my way home to give my kids some presents that I picked up this afternoon. I can see you there. Or not. I don't think it makes a big difference anymore. Come on, Linda. I'll take you back to your office, I replied as I turned my back on my soon-to-be ex-wife. Linda commented aloud as they got inside the car. That was awkward to say the least. What are the possibilities of us both choosing the same motel, not to mention sharing a room? What are you planning to do, Keith? She asked. I said, go home, see my kids, and then go from there. I dropped Linda off at her office. Call me later, she said as I drove away. So here I am driving home asking myself if I could go back in time. Will I? So what would I change? I adored my children and would not have traded them for anything. But was this enough? Update 3. I go in the door and the kids rush to me. Dad, you're at home. We have missed you so much. I gave them the gifts, and after opening them, we decided to order pizza, which arrived approximately 45 minutes later. He took one glance at me and went upstairs. We never saw her that night. I told the kids in the most sensitive way imaginable that their mother and I were splitting up and that everything will work out in the end. We quote D have to work it out later given the circumstances. We had a great night, and by 10 o'clock, I had all of my clothes in the back of my car and was on my way to my hotel room. Linda was in the foyer waiting for me. Hello, sailor. Looking for a friendlier port? She replied with a laugh. I was bummed, but I caught her as she ran into my arms. She began to say, I'm sorry, but I stopped her with a kiss. We didn't make love that night, but held each other. I just wanted to feel her body against mine. In the morning, we ate breakfast and made plans. I moved in with Linda that weekend and was served with papers on Tuesday. Linda convinced me to just let it all go. You are better off without her. And why participate in a PI* singing contest? I gave her the house till the kids were 18. There is no alimony. We kept our individual 401ks and split everything 50-50ths. Due to her extensive travel, the children ended up living with Linda and myself, so we sold the house and split the proceeds. I handed Greg a get-out-of-jail card and said nothing to his wife or boss. He was more than grateful. Ann and I divided holidays, and in the end, I came out on top. I believe after 15 years, I got a second chance with Linda, and each day, I thank my lucky stars. I met a woman who loved me for who I am. When I arrived home, the kids raced to me, shouting how much they missed me as I handed them their gifts. We sat around the kitchen table conversing until Ann burst through the front door. Who is the slut you were with? And how long have you been avoiding her? She yelled. Kids, your mother and I need to chat, so go to your rooms and I'll see you once we're finished. I informed them that after watching them climb the steps, I would face them. I guess I see why I wasn't receiving affection anymore. I simply want to know why. Keith, you were too boring in the sack, and if you were half the man Greg was, maybe I'd still avoid you. She spit at me. So gather the rest of your shit and get the heck out of here, you yelled at me. Duck you in. This is also my house, so if you really want out, go hiking. Oh, I am sorry. I just remembered Greg already has a wife and 2 children, at least for the moment. You would not, she yelled back at me. Honey, he is going down big time, I replied with a smile. So that's how it started. I filed documents citing Greg as the grounds for my divorce and countersued, blaming Linda. Life was awful at home, but there was no way I was leaving. Thank God I traveled 3 days per week. Linda tried to calm me down, but I felt Ann and Greg had played me, and I wanted my pound of flesh. The judge dismissed our lawsuits because there was no physical evidence. Her word versus mine. He divided our assets 50-50ths and handed me physical custody of the children. Because Ann was out of town so frequently in 90 days. Divorce was finalized, but I still had one card to play. I sued Greg and his employer for $2 million for failing to enforce their morals clause. I think 2 married folks aren't supposed to mess about on company time. They gave my lawyer a lot of hassle until we received depositions from everyone in their sales department. No one seemed willing to take the fall for the two of them. Everyone was aware of their extended lunches and frequent overnight trips. In the end, I settled for $250K, and the termination of Ann and Greg was already toast when Sandy found out. So she tossed all of his things out on the grass and turned on the sprinklers. She kicked him out of the house and filed a restraining order against him. He and Ann soon moved into a one-bedroom apartment, which was all they could afford at the time. So here I am in my house with my children, who are royally pissed at me for raking their mother over the coals. I don't have to sell the house until Candy is 18, so Ann can wait for her money till then. Linda's reaction was the only surprise for me. She has not spoken to me since the whole thing began. She urged me to walk away, but I couldn't do so. I told her. The two of them made me a clock, and I wanted my retribution, which I got. We made small chat at the gym, and I kept telling her I wanted her in my life, but she says she didn't like my spiteful personality. She saw. Oh well, I'll keep trying. I guess if I could go back in time, I would not have married. And given what I know now, I'm not sure what else I would have changed. For the time being, I go to work and drive about in my new automobile, which I received as part of my settlement, thinking about what if. Final update. The kids were overjoyed to see me, and they both wanted to talk to me at once. I gave them their gifts, and they told me about their lives. Subdued comma. He stepped through the door around 45 minutes later. Kids, why don't you go up to your rooms so I may speak with your father? She told him. We'll order pints later, but right now we need to be alone. At least I now understand why you no longer wanted to be in love with me. I hope Greg was worth ruining our family and marriage. I promised her, I'll file tomorrow and be out of your hair by the weekend. I do not want you to leave, I told a surprised Keith, and I do not want a divorce. I want to try again. She suggested it could have been another. And I saw Greg come out of the motel room. Perhaps another man has shut me off from any genuine affection for the past year. Maybe another man didn't notice me leaving a motel room with Linda. After experiencing the best love I've experienced in recent years, I asked her, I heard both of you, and you undoubtedly heard Greg and I in the adjacent room as well. She responded. Keith? Yes? We ducked, but I did not offer him my date. Nobody has had that since we got married. She told me, whether you believe it or not, this was our first time together like that. We played around, but never went all the way until today. Why don't I believe you when you practically cut me off a year ago and claim you've remained celibate all this time? What kind of a fool do you think I am? And climbed up the stairs, coming down with a small box. Linda, do you love her? I can't explain right now, but she was the one who pushed me to get back with you, not the other way around. I told her, and everything I stated about my love for her was real. But it made me sad because I remembered how it used to be with you. I spoke with a tear in my eye. Where are we going from here? They ordered food for the kids and talked. I talked for the first time in years. I found out and was still upset over becoming pregnant and not being able to complete college. She blamed me after seeing everyone else with a sheepskin get promoted ahead of her. She didn't understand how far she'd pushed me and the kids until she struck the fan. She just believed everyone was being selfish by not wanting her to advance up the corporate ladder. She didn't love Greg. It happened right after a meeting with a new customer. I was bewildered, and the more we talked about it, the hotter I became. By midnight, the children had gone to bed and the two of them were fatigued. She led me by the hand to their bedroom, which was not ready. That's all I said before she interrupted me. I do not want love. I only need you next to me. The kids awoke at 9 o'clock the next morning and were shocked to discover us in the same room. We all ate breakfast together, and after the kids left to do their own thing, we finished conversing. We decided to try again and gave her notice after consulting with a marriage counselor. Monday, 2 months later, she was enrolled in college. The children were also assigned weekly duties to help relieve some of the burden off their mother. Because I didn't travel anymore, I was in charge of all the meals, which ultimately improved beyond soup and sandwiches. Linda and I are still friends, and she is glad we gave it another go. She did mention that if things didn't work out, she still wanted first dibs on me, and I told her I'd keep that in mind. And I no longer felt love. We made love. I did small things to spice up our romantic lives. Most importantly, we communicated and never went to bed without telling each other how we felt about the other. So, if I could go back and do it over, I would. I'd go back to the night of the party, and instead of doing it bareback, I'd put on a rubber and duck the shit from her dot. This way, we might still be together and get a do-over without any regrets. But I continue to wonder about Linda. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened.